Chapter 19:15. Dao Ji, who was 8 feet tall, had tears in his eyes. His stupid actions just now had completely ruined his future. Was he going to die with these idiots? Anlin and Su Xiaolan heard Mo Hai's yell and looked in the direction of the voice. They saw a charred man with a hoe in his hand and a large bag of flame crystals on his back. He was looking at them anxiously. Anlin and Su Xiaolan were both shocked. Holy F***ck, who was this person? Mo Hai's heart sank when he saw Anlin and Su Xiaolan's shocked and confused expressions. However, he still yelled, "It's me, I'm Mo Hai." Anlin and Su Xiaolan were even more shocked. What? You're Mo Hai? Why is senior brother Mo Hai also in the realm of stars? Heavens! Mo Hai, you've been tortured to this extent. Anlin and Su Xiaolan were both enraged when they saw Mo Hai's miserable state. Now is not the time to bicker about this. Hurry up and run. The Vermilion Bird Tribe's revenge is coming soon. Mo Hai was extremely anxious. He flew to Anlin and Su Xiaolan's side and anxiously urged them. How can I run? The word run doesn't exist in my dictionary, Anlin said calmly with a proud expression. Su Xiaolan even drew her dragon sparrow sword. Senior brother Mo Hai has been tortured to this extent. The Vermilion Bird Tribe has gone too far. I, the Divine Phoenix Maiden, will definitely not sit by and do nothing. Anlin was furious. Don't worry, senior brother Mo Hai. I will definitely avenge you. Mo Hai's heart sank. Why did things seem to have gotten worse after he appeared? Previously, Anlin and Su Xiaolan might have been able to escape on their own. But after he appeared, their hatred toward the Vermilion Bird Tribe had skyrocketed very quickly. The entire red Vermilion Bird planet began to tremble. The enormous array formation covered the earth and covered the sky. Endless scorching earth fire soared into the sky, forming a giant scarlet vermilion bird at the peak of the sky that was 1,000,000 feet long. It's appeared. That's the Red Sparrow planet's planetary formation, the Red Sparrow Godkiller formation. Dao Ji's legs were trembling, and he had a horrified expression on his face. This is a terrifying formation that is said to be able to instantly kill all Dao integration stage cultivators. It's over, it's over, it's over. Is it too late for me to distance myself from this? Not only him, but the other miners also retreated in fear, afraid that they would be affected by the formation's attack. All of the Vermilion Bird Tribe living beings looked up at Anlin with haughty expressions. Anyone who dares to attack a return to void stage mighty figure of our Vermilion Bird Tribe will only have one fate, and that is death. Despicable fools! How dare you challenge the might of the Vermilion Bird Tribe? I'll show you the true power of the Vermilion Bird Tribe. It's your honor to die under the power of the most noble vermilion bird. Die, ants! Die, 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 die! A bunch of spirit-nurturing stage and soul formation stage trash shouted wildly in the distance, displaying their loud voices. Anlin glanced at them, and a look of exasperation appeared on his face. The weaker they are, the more powerful their mouths are. Su Xiaolan massaged her brows. Although the bloodline of the Vermilion Bird Tribe is indeed powerful and has a noble and holy aura, why are these pure-blooded vermilion birds before us all acting like shrews? If possible, I really don't want to admit that half of my bloodline belongs to the vermilion bird. Once their status rises, no one will be able to control them, so they'll naturally become arrogant, Anlin said with a smile. Is this the time to talk about this? We've been trapped by the formation, and the Vermilion Bird Tribe is going to deal with us. Why are you still laughing? Hurry up and run. Mo Hai was so anxious that he was about to cry, yet Anlin and Su Xiaolan were still chatting cheerfully and wittily. Where did their confidence come from? Run? Why should we run? Anlin cocked his head to the side. The Vermilion Bird Tribe's attack is coming. What else can we do but run? Mo Hai replied in a panic. If the vermilion bird tribes attack you speak of is this red vermilion bird god-slaying formation. And Lin's snowy white eyes looked toward the boundless crimson formation. He drew his evil-slaying sword and abruptly slashed in a certain direction. As long as we do this, we'll be able to take care of it. Boom. A dark black sword projection split heaven and earth. A gap was suddenly torn open in the crimson formation by a peerlessly domineering power of darkness. The massive crimson vermilion bird in the sky let loose a wail of anguish as its body was forcibly disintegrated. Immediately afterward, the formation that encompassed the sky and earth suddenly collapsed, transforming into countless specks of red light that disappeared without a trace. The extremely oppressive might instantly disappeared into thin air. It's gone. Emohi's mouth gaped open in shock. He stared blankly at the white-robed male who was wielding the black sword. He suddenly felt that this male's silhouette was a little dazzling. Impossible. That's a planetary formation that utilizes the flame power of the entire planet. It's capable of insta-killing all super mighty beings of the Tao integration stage. How could it be destroyed with a single strike? Dao Ji's expression was completely blank. It was as if he had just witnessed an unbelievable miracle. The other miners were all astonished. The excited vermilion birds were also dumbfounded. What happened? Why did this happen? Beep beep beep. Planetary crisis. Level 1 alert. Level 1 alert. Unleash vermilion bird wave now. Range. The entire vermilion bird tribe. A series of alarms reverberated throughout the red vermilion bird planet. Level 1 alert. This is the warning for the destruction of a planet. I really didn't think that he would be able to do this. Dao Ji took a deep breath and looked toward the male in the distance. There was a look of awe and veneration in his eyes. The supervisors of the vermilion bird tribe were even more aware of what this warning signified. The male in the distance possessed the power to destroy an entire planet. Moreover, they could also be destroyed by him at any moment. And Lin's gaze drifted over to the vermilion bird supervisors in the distance. The vermilion birds who had been shouting fearlessly earlier all shrunk their heads back. They were so cowardly that they couldn't utter a single word. Seeing this, Emohi couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Even if you were more powerful than the vermilion bird tribe, in the eyes of the vermilion bird tribe, you were still trash. This saying didn't seem to apply to Enlin. When a person's power reached a certain level, they could really strike fear and admiration into the hearts of the vermilion bird tribe. Right at this moment, a loud and holy voice suddenly traveled over from the distance. Out of the way. Those who have nothing to do with this, get out of the way. The 6 vermilion bird sages are handling a case. Holy flames of 6 different colors filled the entire sky. It was as if the scorching temperature was going to incinerate everything in this world. There was another wave of commotion among the crowd of miners. They silently continued to retreat and looked up at the sky with reverence in their eyes. It was as if they were looking at some mythical figure. The 6 vermilion bird sages were renowned overlords in the entire realm of stars. Each of them was at the Tao integration pinnacle stage and possessed the purest vermilion bird bloodline. Moreover, each of them possessed a holy flame of a different element. It could be said that they were the most powerful beings below the God of Creation stage. 6 gigantic figures descended from the heavens, exuding boundless might. The living beings on the red vermilion bird planet instinctively found it difficult to breathe. Some of them had already gone weak in the knees and started to tremble in fear of being affected by the terrifying holy flames in the sky. Each of the 6 vermilion bird sages possessed the power to destroy a planet. And now, all 6 of the 6 vermilion bird sages had been mobilized. Chapter 1916. Enlin raised his head and looked up at the 6 mighty beings in the sky. Each and every one of their wings could encompass an area with a radius of tens of thousands of feet, and a gentle flap of their wings could conjure up gale-force winds that could incinerate hundreds of tall mountains. Not only that, but the extremely pure and vast bloodline aura emanating from their bodies struck countless living beings with a sense of inferiority, and they instinctively wanted to submit to these noble and beautiful beings. There were a total of 6 of these beings. The holy flames unleashed by them had already blanketed the entire sky, and they were as dazzling and spectacular as the sunset, with no end in sight. If these holy flames were to fall, they would be able to instantly annihilate all living beings on this planet. Each of the 6 vermilion bird sages possesses an aura comparable to that of guardian deities like Bai Shui and Qi Yu, but there are a total of 6 of them. Is this what Bai Shui meant when she said that they could fight on par with the vermilion bird tribe? And Lin looked at the 6 powerful vermilion birds with a speechless expression. But the guardian deities of the Azure Dragon tribe can unleash a power comparable to that of a god of creation. This is a unique trait of the Azure Dragon tribe, and the Vermilion Bird tribe doesn't have a similar mystic technique. Su Xiaolan smiled lightly. That's true. And Lin nodded. The Azure Dragon tribe's guardian deities could unleash a short-lived mystic technique, and even though it was a one-time consumable, its explosive power was not inferior to Earth's nuclear deterrence. Not only could it intimidate its opponents, but it could also turn the tide of the battle once it was unleashed. Mr. and Lin, what should we do now? This isn't the time to be talking about this, is it? The 6 vermilion bird sages have all been mobilized. Mo Hai spoke nervously. He had just witnessed Lin's absolute power, but he still couldn't help but panic in the face of 6 vermilion bird sages. Each and every one of these vermilion birds gave him an aura that far exceeded that of the sect leader and grand elder of the vermilion bird sect. He didn't even dare to imagine just how powerful they were. Lowly mortals, we are the 6 vermilion bird sages, the supreme rulers of the vermilion bird tribe. Do you know your crimes for attacking the venerated vermilion bird tribe? One of the vermilion birds, whose entire body was enshrouded in boundless white mist, spoke in an ethereal voice. That voice was pleasant and ethereal to the extreme, not like the voice of the mortal world. Moreover, it contained an inviolable dignity. And Lin looked up at the 6 proud vermilion birds in the sky and sneered, "What's with all the nonsense? If you want to fight, then fight, stop wasting time. If it weren't for the great Empress Vermilion Bird, I would have killed those vermilion birds who offended me a long time ago." That's right, and Lin had shown mercy in the end. He hadn't killed Ing Kai, Huang Muzi, and the other living beings. Mo Hai was given quite a fright by Lin's words. What the F***ck, Lin's words were too domineering, weren't they? This was the rhythm of a war. Rumble, sure enough, the sacred flames in the sky surged wildly. Above the divine flame was the holy flame, and the holy flame was the highest level of all flames. Even in the Tai Chu continent, which was at the pinnacle of the cultivation civilization, it was extremely rare to see a holy flame. However, 6 of them had suddenly appeared here. Furthermore, their bloodlines were so pure and profound, so the might of their holy flames was even more terrifying. The 6 vermilion bird sages are probably the most skilled at playing with fire in the entire realm of stars, right? Lin seemed to be completely unfazed by the 6 vermilion bird sages' rage, and a faint smile appeared on his face. Playing with fire? We are the gods who rule over fire. How dare the likes of you criticize us? Vulgar and despicable beings can only spout such vulgar words. In the sky, the 6 vermilion bird sages' voices were like the voice of the heavens, and their tones were extremely cold. Lin didn't know what to say. Look, they're not happy to be praised either. Cut the crap and hurry up and purify them. Vermilion bird Nanli. Vermilion bird Yu Luo. Vermilion bird Bing Xian. Vermilion bird Tianjin. Vermilion bird Huan Jin. Vermilion bird Tai Jing. I sentence you to the punishment of burning by fire. Kneel and accept your death. Boom, boom, boom. 6 streaks of holy flames fell from the sky before crashing viciously toward Lin. From Lin's perspective, It looked as if the sky had transformed into a sea of holy flames. Then, the sea quickly fell toward the ground, incinerating everything in its path. There was nowhere to hide. Just the boundless might of the flames alone was enough to make all living beings lose the courage to resist. Mo-Hai was also scared out of his wit. He had never seen such an apocalyptic scene before. Although he loved being burned by fire, his instincts told him that he would be incinerated into ashes the moment he came into contact with the sea of flames that was falling from the sky. There was no way he could enjoy it. Unlin looked at the falling flames and smiled. "You say you're the gods who rule over fire?" "Sorry, I'm the one." A crimson divine halo appeared above his head. Unlin made a grabbing motion toward the falling holy flames, and a fluctuation that was imbued with the power of the supreme laws of nature instantly spread throughout heaven and earth. Thump! It was like the sound of a heartbeat. The 6 types of terrifying sacred flames instantly froze in place like a painting. Even the flames on the bodies of the 6 vermilion bird sages instantly broke free of their control. They froze in place and then bowed down. That's right, all the flames between heaven and earth lowered their embers and temperatures as they bowed down to a stunning white-robed figure. The vermilion birds and miners on the red vermilion bird planet were dumbstruck. The bodies of the 6 vermilion bird sages trembled violently. Their arrogant faces that looked down on them like ants were now filled with confusion and shock. For the first time, an incomprehensible fear surfaced in their hearts. What kind of power is this? Why am I losing control of my flames? Even the 6 holy flames have bowed down to me. Why are you all still standing? Get down! Unlin roared angrily, and his eyes suddenly turned a pure gold color. Countless divine symbols flashed in his eyes, and at the same time, a golden fluctuation spread to every corner of heaven and earth. Regardless of whether it was the 6 vermilion bird sages or the living beings on the red vermilion bird planet, they all felt as if they were looking at a supreme being when they saw Unlin. This was a boundlessly majestic figure that stood between heaven and earth. His eyes were like the sun and the moon, and his shoulders were like a galaxy. An unimaginably supreme aura emanated from his body. Super Divine Might Technique, activate. No! The 6 vermilion bird sages trembled violently as they howled in anguish and plummeted from the sky. They were the most noble beings. They looked down on everything, disrespected heaven and earth, and only respected the great Empress Vermilion Bird. But now they actually felt boundless respect and submission towards another existence. They wanted to kneel down and become the other party's bootlickers. Boom, boom, boom. The earth trembled and trembled. The most supreme and prideful beings of the Vermilion Bird tribe plummeted to the ground one after another and fell into the dust. They lay helplessly on the ground and pressed their heads against the ground in front of Unlin as they trembled in fear. The 6 vermilion bird sages all knelt before Unlin. Chapter 1917. This was an extremely shocking scene. This was an unimaginable scene for all the living beings present. The extremely proud and noble 6 vermilion bird sages, the most arrogant beings in this world, who wouldn't show any respect even to a god of creation, were actually kneeling and kowtowing to Unlin on the red vermilion bird planet. Almost all of the vermilion bird living beings had their eyes rolled into the back of their heads, and they were foaming at the mouth. Many of the miners who had been forced to do manual labor also fainted and collapsed to the ground. Those who could resist fainting were all returned to void stage mighty figures. However, their legs had also become weak, and they all knelt to the ground. Dao Ji and Mo-Hai were no exception. In reality, Unlin's target was only the 6 vermilion bird sages. As for the other living beings, it was merely a wisp of his might that had accidentally dispersed. So, the divine might you unleash at full power is this powerful. Su Xiaolan's face was flushed red, and her eyes were as bright as stars as she stared at Unlin. How about it? Do you want to have a taste as well? Unlin had yet to unleash his divine might, and he glanced at Su Xiaolan. What are you saying? Don't be naughty. A faint blush appeared on Su Xiaolan's exquisite features as she spoke with a hint of anger. If Enlin unleashed his super divine might technique on her, she would probably kneel down as well, right? How embarrassing! Just thinking about it makes me feel both embarrassed and excited. Enlin waved a hand, and the holy flames that had engulfed the entire heaven and earth instantly disappeared. The 6 vermilion bird sages were struggling violently on the ground. Their brains were telling them not to kneel for the sake of their pride and dignity, but their bodies and bloodlines were instinctively telling them to kneel. This was the power of the super divine might technique. The weak were insta-killed, and the powerful were forced to kneel. Impossible! This is impossible. Why is my bloodline afraid of your might? My bloodline is clearly the noblest of all. Great Empress Vermilion Bird, I've let you down. The 6 vermilion bird sages were either shocked and terrified, or they were so ashamed that they wanted to commit suicide. They, who were the proudest of them, actually kneeled to a human. This caused them to completely lose their dignity. Yes, a bird's life without pride was meaningless. Chirp. Sparrow Bing Xian's body was the first to be ignited with frosty flames. It wanted to freeze him to death with its flames. After seeing how decisive Vermilion Bird Bing Xian was, the rest of the 6 vermilion bird sages also revealed determined expressions. At this moment, a pair of icy blue eyes suddenly appeared in the sky. This pair of eyes was especially beautiful, like a clear spring, pure and flawless, refreshing the mind. The scorching temperature of the red sparrow planet also cooled down because of this pair of eyes. A cool breeze blew past. The flames on Vermilion Bird Bing Xian's body were suddenly dispersed by a mighty force. The 6 vermilion bird sages looked up at the sky, and their eyes suddenly turned red. They knelt on the ground even more piously, and tears of grievance and shame flowed from their eyes. Greetings, great Empress Vermilion Bird. Greetings, great Empress Vermilion Bird. This time, they didn't feel any psychological burden lying down. Although they were kneeling toward Enlin, they hoped that Enlin wouldn't misunderstand. They were kneeling toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird in the sky. Sixth son, this matter cannot be blamed on you. It was he who forcefully suppressed your unyielding heads. Your bloodline is still noble, and your pride still shines. An extremely dignified and pleasing voice came from the sky. As if they had been cured, the 6 vermilion bird sages all knelt on the ground with tears streaming down their faces. Thank you, great Empress Vermilion Bird. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's glory shall never be extinguished. We are willing to go through fire and water for the great Empress Vermilion Bird. Enlin felt like his horizons had been broadened by the fact that such proud beings as the 6 vermilion bird sages were speaking like bootlickers. At this moment, the pair of beautiful eyes in the sky turned toward Enlin and the others. Enlin's heart jolted and his body tensed up. He was about to face the might of a god of creation who possessed a holy birth. A few days ago, I swallowed my own divine sense and went into seclusion to absorb it. As a result, I didn't have the time to receive the two of you. I apologize for causing you to suffer, the great Empress Vermilion Bird said in a gentle voice. Her voice was so warm and gentle that it was as if she were the big sister next door. Upon hearing this, the 6 vermilion bird sages, Mo Hai, Enlin, and the others were instantly dumbfounded. What's going on? Why is the great Empress Vermilion Bird speaking in such a friendly manner? Not only is she explaining why she didn't come, but she's even apologizing? Didn't she see that Enlin had beaten up the supervisor and forced the 6 vermilion bird sages to kneel? Enlin was already prepared for a fight, but the great Empress Vermilion Bird's reaction didn't make sense. Wasn't she known as the proudest and most revered being? Countless questions surged into everyone's minds. However, the great Empress Vermilion Bird turned toward Su Xiaolan with kindness in her eyes. I was the one who summoned you here. I'm truly sorry that you received such treatment. I'll definitely make it up to you. All the Vermilion Bird tribe living beings were astonished. So, Su Xiaolan was really summoned here by the great Empress Vermilion Bird? Huang Muzi, Ing Kai, and the other vermilion birds were even more regretful upon hearing this. They really wanted to slap themselves a few times. Unfortunately, they had already been crippled by Enlin. They couldn't even move. Ha ha! That's not a problem. It's good that the misunderstanding has been resolved. Enlin chuckled amiably. In any case, they didn't suffer any losses from this conflict. Instead, they felt quite satisfied. Follow my directions, and I'll take you to the Vermilion Bird Tribe's Flame Heart Immortal Realm. There, we can settle all our karma. The great Empress Vermilion Bird invited them. Immediately afterward, the pair of eyes in the sky transformed into a small red sparrow that flew toward a certain direction. Flame Heart Immortal Realm? The great Empress Vermilion Bird is actually inviting us there? Only we have the right to enter that place. The 6 vermilion bird sages were slightly indignant. However, they could only mutter among themselves as they followed behind the small red sparrow. Enlin and Su Xiaolan looked at each other. Then, they rose into the sky and followed behind the small red sparrow. The great Empress Vermilion Bird had taken the initiative to invite them to settle their karma. Both of them had the same thoughts, so they naturally had to accept this invitation. If they handled the karma of a holy beast well, there would be many benefits. Hey, wait for me! Emohai eagerly followed behind them. On the red vermilion bird planet, the miners and supervising vermilion birds looked on as Enlin and the others flew further and further away. They felt as if they were dreaming. They all thought that Enlin and the others had offended the Vermilion Bird Tribe and were about to be executed on the spot. Who would have thought that Enlin was actually able to break through a planetary slaughter formation with a single strike? Then, he subdued the 6 vermilion bird sages with a single thought? Furthermore, he had displayed unimaginable prowess. In the end, he was even invited by the great Empress Vermilion Bird to the core region of the Vermilion Bird Realm. This world was truly insane. Since when did a freakishly powerful mighty figure like Enlin appear in the human race? Dao Ji muttered to himself as he gazed at Enlin's disappearing figure. No one could answer his question. However, the living beings on the red vermilion bird planet knew that the breathtaking white figure had already been deeply engraved in their minds. Perhaps they would never be able to forget it for the rest of their lives. Chapter 1918. Enlin, this vermilion bird is a treacherous and cunning character. Don't be fooled by the fact that it's smiling at you, but it's definitely cursing you countless times behind your back. It could turn on you at any time, so you have to be careful. Emohai transmitted his voice to Enlin. Is that so? Enlin faltered momentarily. I thought the vermilion bird was a nice big sister. Nice my A**s. When she needed the divine sense in my ring, she was so nice to me and even made the arrogant vermilion bird tribe's spirit transform into a beautiful woman to dance for me. In the end, after the great Empress Vermilion Bird absorbed what she wanted, she turned into an ingrate and banished me to the red vermilion bird planet to mine. Emohai gritted his teeth in hatred. Enlin clicked his tongue in wonder upon hearing this. Su Xiaolan also became wary upon hearing this. However, the vermilion bird bloodline in her body instinctively made her feel close to the holy beast, the vermilion bird. By the way, Sister Shangguanyi, how are Brother Yang Yuan and the others? Su Xiaolan asked. They were sucked into the realm of stars like me. However, when I arrived at the vermilion bird territory, I couldn't see them anymore, Emohai replied dejectedly. Enlin stroked his chin. I have the Ring of the East, so I was teleported to the Azure Dragon territory. You have the Ring of the South, so you were teleported to the Vermilion Bird territory. Based on this, they should have been teleported to the White Tiger territory and the Xian Wu territory respectively. Emohai panicked. Oh no, don't tell me they've been sent to mine as well? Enlin and Su Xiaolan rolled their eyes at this senior brother. Did this idiot's brain go haywire from all the mining? Did he really think that all holy beasts were as ungrateful as the vermilion bird? Even if they were ungrateful, they might not have been sent to mine. Why would they be sent to mine coal? Besides, perhaps they were lucky enough to be receiving friendly treatment from a holy beast right now? And Lin felt like the white tiger was a bit more ferocious and aggressive. Brother Yang Yuan might be in some danger, but Sister Shangguan Yi would definitely be able to go to the Xian Wu territory with ease. Shangguan Yi was the reincarnation of the god of creation stage ice matriarch. Now that she had awakened most of her bloodline and memories and progressed to the Tao integration initial stage, her potential was limitless. Now that they had encountered the black tortoise, a holy beast of the same attribute, if they could have a friendly exchange and cooperation, the benefits would definitely be greater than two. The black tortoise had a good temper, so this kind of cooperation should be easy to achieve, right? Shangguan Yi's cultivation base should be able to progress further, right? However, Lin was wrong about this. In the extreme north of the star region, Shangguan Yi voluntarily returned the Ring of the North, and Xian Wu was indeed a good holy beast. In return, Xian Wu took her to the mystic ball domain to observe the paramount Tao of mountain and water. In the end, just as they arrived below the profound sphere inexplicably split open. A terrifying high-energy flood instantly engulfed the entire secret place and the planet, causing huge losses to the Black Tortoise clan. Xian Wu was busy fighting the flood for 3 days and 3 nights before finally stabilizing the situation. The mystic ball domain was leaking, so Xian Wu had no choice but to take Shangguan Yi elsewhere. It took Shangguan Yi elsewhere to enjoy the rainbow Tao sky of the Xian Wu tribe. However, when they arrived at the rainbow Tao sky, the sky was suddenly struck by a once-in-10,000-years storm. Xian Wu was dumbstruck. Why was it so unlucky? Shangguan Yi told it to just take her back to the Tai Chu continent. How could the black tortoise do something like that? It had received a favor from the holy beast, yet it did nothing in return. Was this something a holy beast should do? It was a complete insult to its title as a holy beast. After a few more twists and turns, Xian Wu didn't have anything else to offer, so it decided to take Shangguan Yi to observe its most important treasure, the Xian Wu heart essence. This was a paragon treasure that was related to the holy Tao. The holy beast Xian Wu spat out the Xian Wu heart essence from its stomach before introducing the Xian Wu heart essence to Shangguan Yi with a triumphant expression. It also told her that she could observe the Xian Wu heart essence for an entire day. However, before the Xian Wu heart essence could even be handed over to Shangguan Yi, the elements and energy within the heart essence suddenly became violent. It had clearly entered a period of instability. The Xian Wu heart essence would have its period a few times every 10,000 years. Xian Wu's expression shifted slightly, but it didn't panic. But at this moment, due to all sorts of coincidences, the chaotic currents within the void interacted with each other, creating a multidimensional destruction. In the end, an extremely terrifying chaotic lightning was born. The chaotic bolt of lightning instantly tore through the void and struck the Xian Wu heart essence before it could react. Boom! The Xian Wu heart essence exploded. Tragedy struck Xian Wu. Due to the backlash, it was heavily injured and hurriedly absorbed the shattered black tortoise heart essence. It didn't even have the time to say goodbye and immediately chose to go into seclusion. Shangguan Yi stood rooted to the spot with a blank expression. In the end, she was arrested by the Xian Wu Divine Guardian Squad for attempting to assassinate Xian Wu. Just as Lin was thinking about Shangguan Yi was contemplating life in prison. On the contrary, Yang Yuan, who was in the White Tiger clan's territory, had used the holy vermilion flame unique to his body to cleanse the frost poison from the body of the White Tiger's most beloved daughter at the most critical moment, thereby obtaining a massive opportunity. Not only did he receive the core inheritance of the White Tiger, but he also received a vast amount of treasures and gifts. There were pros and cons to this as well. Yang Yuan received the White Tiger's inheritance and successfully broke through to the Return to Void Pinnacle stage. This was supposed to be a joyous occasion, but because he saved the White Tiger's daughter, he was now being pursued by the White Tiger's daughter. For example, he was being pounced on by the White Tiger's daughter right now. In summary, Mo Hai was the most pitiful of the 4 people who had the rings. The pitiful Mo Hai thought that he was mining as well within the Vermilion Bird territory. The gargantuan Vermilion Bird star was situated at the center of several hundred planets, and boundless flames emanated from it. 8 normal-sized stars were revolving around the Vermilion Bird star. What was strange was that the surrounding planets were almost completely unaffected by these 8 stars. One of the stars suddenly faltered before warping and transforming into a gargantuan flaming bird. Its entire body was an explosive platinum color, and an aura of destruction continued to emanate from it. With a light flap of its wings, scorching air currents would be able to annihilate all living beings in an entire domain. Its body was curled up with its wings folded around itself, as if it were still a sun. However, it raised its head slightly to look at a nearby planet before uttering a few words. Vermilion Bird, I have a bad feeling about this. There's a lot of uncertainty in this situation. It was the first being to refer to the Vermilion Bird by its name. Within the Flame Heart Immortal Realm, a regal being with peerlessly vibrant feathers and enshrouded in a 9-colored holy light opened her extremely beautiful eyes with a smile. This is the perfect opportunity. We can't miss it. I've been waiting for this moment for a very long time. There have been countless successors and countless descendants, but I've finally found one. I don't want to wait any longer. The Platinum Mighty Being remained silent as its body slowly melted into the flames before transforming into a star that revolved around the gargantuan Vermilion Bird star. At this moment, Unlin and the others had already set foot in the Flame Heart Immortal Realm. Chapter 1919. The Flame Heart Immortal Realm was the place where the immortal aura of the immortal Vermilion Star gathered. However, this so-called immortal realm was different from what Unlin had imagined. Ordinary living beings would die in this immortal realm. The sky was a clear azure color. Terrifying and pure flame energy transformed into crimson winds that swept across the land. Every gust of wind was tens of thousands of degrees Celsius and could melt or vaporize a living being with a decent cultivation base. Colorful heat-resistant plants grew all over the land, and they were dazzling. There were even rivers of golden liquid flowing in some places. The temperature of the liquid was even higher, almost to the extent of distorting the void. However, there were also many adorable flame beasts playing in the river. There were also many flame beasts on the ground. Some of them had gorgeous wings, while others were cute and adorable. However, one should not be deceived by their appearances. They could melt a soul formation stage powerful being with just a spit of saliva. Ordinary living beings were very afraid of this place as it was extremely hot. However, the extremely rich and pure flame power here was the favorite of living beings who cultivated in fire-type spell technique. It was not an exaggeration to say that this was a top-notch cultivation ground. Su Xiaolan already had a look of enjoyment on her face. His eyes were filled with infatuation and passion, and his entire body was restless. He looked like he wanted to take off his clothes and completely integrate into this world. The 6 Vermilion Bird sages snorted in disdain when they saw their behavior. Humph, ignorant country bumpkins. It's their good fortune to be able to come to the Flame Heart Immortal Realm. How despicable and laughable! This is the limit of the human race. Look at that man who wants to take off his clothes. How disgusting! These Vermilion Bird living beings could always find something to spit on and build a chain of contempt. Unlin glanced at the 6 Vermilion Bird sages when he heard that. The 6 proud Vermilion Birds instantly trembled and fell silent. They did not want to kneel anymore, especially not in a sacred place like the Flame Heart Immortal Realm. If they did that, they would really be so ashamed that they would want to commit suicide. and Lin smiled faintly. What kind of *T prideful race is that? Aren't they still trembling under my super divine might technique? And Lin and Su Xiaolan followed the little red vermilion bird and witnessed many fiery wonders, such as the glazed flame lake, the flaming tree, the starry plains, the 100,000 feet fiery boulders, and the 3-colored rain clouds. Su Xiaolan blinked her bright eyes as she looked on with an eager expression. She really wanted to leave the group and go off to the side to admire the spectacle. She wanted to have some fun and have some fun. However, she wanted to go the vermilion bird. After a short while, everyone arrived beside a small, exquisite pond. Here, they saw the paramount being of the vermilion bird tribe, who was renowned throughout the entire realm of stars, the great Empress Vermilion Bird. She actually had the appearance of a gorgeous and noble woman. She wore a divine crown on her head, her eyes were clear and warm, her nose was tall, and her lips were dark red like a tender cherry. Her skin was crystalline and translucent, and her snow-white skin revealed a faint blush from the inside out, causing her to seem exceptionally enchanting and intoxicating. What shocked Lin the most was her limitless and graceful figure. Her beautiful figure was wrapped in a red feather dress. She was clearly a devastatingly beautiful seductress, but her eyes were clear and pure, giving off the feeling that she was a holy maiden with no desires. This was the perfect fusion of purity and seductiveness, and Lin was momentarily stunned by her beauty. Mo Hai was completely stupefied. This is the vermilion bird holy beast? She's so beautiful. Why is she treating me like a high and mighty vermilion bird? Why is she treating Lin and Su Xiaolan in such a beautiful and enchanting manner? Why? You're here. Come, sit here. The great Empress Vermilion Bird pointed at a deck chair beside the pool with a gentle smile on her face when she saw Lin and Su Xiaolan. She was sitting beside the pool and soaking her feet. The pool water was golden, and it looked like ordinary pool water. The only difference was that its color was different. However, Lin's pupils contracted slightly when he saw the pool water. The liquid inside the pool was the purest essence of the sun. This was the power of Yang that had reached the pinnacle. He had swallowed a sun before, so he was very familiar with this kind of power. The sun essence contained in the pool water was already enough to form a new sun. Even Tao integration stage super mighty figures would be severely wounded or killed if they came into contact with this pool water, let alone return to void stage mighty figures. This level of flame power was definitely not something they could endure. The great Empress Vermilion Bird soaked in the sun essence with extreme pleasure. Her slender feet swayed in the pool water, creating ripples in the water. She appeared to be extremely content and carefree. She was as beautiful as a painting. Upon hearing this, Lin and Su Xiaolan sat down on the deck chairs. You must be tired after such a long journey. Soak your feet in the pool water. It can relax your muscles and activate your meridians. Especially for Su Xiaolan, it's very beneficial for you. The great Empress Vermilion Bird winked at Su Xiaolan. Even this simple action seemed to be imbued with a myriad of emotions. Truly a lord that could captivate all living things, Lin thought to himself. Upon hearing this, Su Xiaolan took off her shoes cautiously. She was a little apprehensive and hesitant, but in the end, she still dipped her foot into the pool water. Ow, hot, hot, hot! She let out a delicate cry, and her cheeks became slightly flushed. Su Xiaolan initially wanted to withdraw her foot. However, a peculiar sense of comfort transmitted from her bloodline made her cling onto the pool water, and she resisted the urge to withdraw her foot. Soon, she adapted to the temperature of the pool water, and she started to moan in comfort. Lin's lips twitched slightly. This was similar to when he was a mortal and soaked his feet in a basin of water. At first, it was a little hot, but then, it was very comfortable. Being able to experience this feeling after becoming a cultivator was truly not bad. Although Su Xiaolan was currently soaking in the core essence of the sun, water that could scald Tao integration stage cultivators to death. That's right, Su Xiaolan was currently soaking in the sun's core essence. This was probably the difference between a top-notch cultivator and a mortal. Enlin also wanted to soak his feet. The great Empress Vermilion Bird noticed Enlin's expression, and she couldn't help but smile faintly. Come on, don't be so reserved. Come and soak yourself. I remember that you also cultivate a fire-type cultivation method, so soaking your feet will be very beneficial to your body and cultivation. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's words were like a spring breeze caressing one's cheek. Enlin was very pleased to hear this, and he also put his feet down to soak. Zzz, scorching and pure flame energy instantly enveloped his feet and stimulated his body. Even though Enlin's body of the war god had reached the phenomenal success stage, he still felt an incomparable scorching sensation. However, after he got used to this scorching sensation, he felt especially comfortable. Wisps of flame energy transformed into warm currents that flowed from the soles of his feet to his entire body, making him feel extremely comfortable. There's something special about this pool water. The 6 Vermilion Bird sages were envious, jealous. Even they didn't have the right to soak their feet together with the great Empress Vermilion Bird. What right did these two despicable humans have? What right did they have to enjoy a beautiful soak with the great Empress Vermilion Bird? The suckers gritted their teeth, but there was nothing they could do. Enlin was just enjoying himself when he suddenly felt a strange movement beneath his feet. Chapter 1920. Enlin felt a very special feeling emerge from the soles of his feet. It was a soft and itchy feeling. It was as if something wet and slippery was sliding across his feet. It was very comfortable, yet very sensitive. His expression changed slightly, and he immediately looked toward the pool. However, he couldn't see anything. The feeling from his feet also disappeared. Enlin initially thought that this was a coincidence, so he didn't pay much attention to it. Then, he suddenly felt a soft and itchy feeling from the soles of his feet. It was as if something soft and smooth was teasing him. Sensing this, Enlin glanced toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird. Coincidentally, the great Empress Vermilion Bird was also looking at him. She raised her eyebrows slightly and blinked. Her extremely exquisite face was expressionless, yet it exuded an extremely seductive and alluring aura. Enlin, no way, what's going on? The great Empress Vermilion Bird is seducing me? But what's her motive? Enlin didn't forget that the great Empress Vermilion Bird's true form was a vermilion bird. Perhaps she had transformed into a human so that she could better communicate with him and Su Xiaolan. She definitely wouldn't have the urge to reproduce with a human. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, he felt another teasing sensation from the soles of his feet. Xiaolan, do you feel anything special from your feet? Enlin secretly transmitted his voice into her ear. Su Xiaolan swayed her little feet and tilted her head. I think so. It's just a little hot, but it's also a very comfortable feeling. What's wrong? Enlin, as expected, this feeling is only directed toward me? Enlin suddenly started to panic. What is the great Empress Vermilion Bird trying to do? When he was talking to Su Xiaolan just now, there was a smooth and itchy flow of heat teasing him. This is definitely a trap. I can't fall for it. Enlin suddenly withdrew his feet and smiled. I'm done. Su Xiaolan squinted her eyes in enjoyment. Seeing this, she was a little astonished. So fast? It's so comfortable in here. Shouldn't you soak more? It's good for your body. That's right. Why are you in such a hurry, Taoist Enlin? The great Empress Vermilion Bird also revealed a gentle and alluring smile. Such a beautiful and intoxicating smile, such a gentle and soft voice. If it were anyone else, they would have already succumbed to the temptation. However, Enlin's heart was as hard as steel, and he remained unmoved. It's fine, you guys enjoy yourselves. I'm going to rest on the chair. Enlin declined with a smile. Be*****. How dare you refuse Great Empress Vermilion Bird's request? Vermilion Bird Nanli roared with rage. Vermilion Luo also shouted in. Vermilion Luo you. They were extremely envious that Enlin could soak his feet in the same pool as the Great Empress Vermilion Bird. The Great Emian Vermilion Lin they envious, as vermilion as sweet, and he as he as if. The Great Empress Vermilion Bird shrugged nonchalantly. Forget it. Some people don't understand romance. I don't have anything to say. As she spoke, she chatted with Su Xiaolan about the Vermilion Bird tribe. From time to time, she would even joke around. She didn't have the arrogance that members of the Vermilion Bird tribe should have. Instead, she was conversing with them as if they were on the same level. This made Su Xiaolan feel a little overwhelmed. She had come here to resolve her karma. Why did it feel like they were about to become two very close sisters after interacting with each other for a while? However, this was all a misconception. After chatting for a while, they finally talked about this karma. At the time, I was imprisoned in the Vermilion Bird trial grounds. A powerful being from the Man tribe took advantage of this and extracted my essence Dao blood. Unexpectedly, this essence Dao blood was obtained by you by a stroke of luck. Not only that, but you also brought this bloodline to greater heights and almost reached the pinnacle of the Vermilion Bird tribe. This is your destiny, and I'm very happy for you. The Great Empress Vermilion Bird spoke lazily, as if this was a trivial matter that had nothing to do with her. Speaking of this, I still have to thank you. If it weren't for your essence Dao blood, I, Su Xiaolan, wouldn't have achieved what I have today. Speaking of this, Su Xiaolan appeared extremely solemn. She bowed deeply to the holy beast Vermilion Bird. The Great Empress Vermilion Bird looked at the solemn Su Xiaolan, and there was still a gentle smile on her face. There's no need to thank me. This is an opportunity that belongs to you, and I didn't do anything. However, if you really want to repay me, I do have a suggestion. Please tell me, Su Xiaolan said solemnly. I'll definitely do my best to fulfill your wish. It's not a big deal, so there's no need to be so serious. The Great Empress Vermilion Bird smiled gently. I just want you to inherit my holy birth. I don't want to be the holy beast Vermilion Bird anymore. How about you take over? The atmosphere suddenly fell silent. Enlin was lying on his chair. Upon hearing this, he almost fell off his chair. Mo Hai's eyes widened, and he even forgot to breathe. The 6 Vermilion Bird sages were all dumbstruck. Even Su Xiaolan felt like her brain was buzzing, and her mind went blank for a short period of time. What did you just say? Her breathing quickened. Can you inherit my holy birth? Just treat it as your repayment. The Great Empress Vermilion Bird's eyes were clear and gentle as she calmly looked at the slightly agitated woman beside her. Su Xiaolan felt like her outlook on cultivation had received a severe blow. There was a look of incredulity on her face. What's going on? Am I repaying you, or are you repaying me? It was as if a person's life was in danger, and then Papa Ma suddenly appeared and saved that person's life. That person ran over to Papa Ma and wanted to repay him. Papa Ma replied, "Sure, help me do something. How about inheriting my business empire worth several trillion yuan?" Furthermore, he would also give her several 100 billion yuan as a bonus. This was King bizarre. It was too surreal. Su Xiaolan found this extremely difficult to accept. Enlin almost knelt down in front of Su Xiaolan. He finally realized that he definitely had the attribute of bringing prosperity to his wife. When Su Xiaolan went out with him, all the fortuitous encounters belonged to her. The inheritance of the Azure Dragon tribe was already quite extraordinary. During their journey to the Dragon Dao Pond, Su Xiaolan had been using hacks to make contact with the essence of her Dao of the true dragon. She didn't think that her trip to the Vermilion Bird tribe to settle her karma would be even more heaven-defying. The Vermilion Bird tribe's boss actually wanted her to inherit the holy birth. It was too bizarre, too dreamy. The clear origin dragon had sacrificed his life for this holy birth. What about Lon? She had wanted to repay the debt of gratitude, but the other party had given her a sainthood instead. If the clear origin dragon were to learn about this, he would probably be enraged to death. Who could he go to reason with? The 6 vermilion bird sages were so frightened that they almost broke down. They continuously kowtowed and wailed as they begged the great Empress Vermilion Bird to retract her command. Why was that? Great Empress Vermilion Bird was doing a great job, so why did she have to abdicate? Also, why did they let a mixed-race human inherit the holy position? None of the living beings present understood. Even Lon and Enlin didn't understand. It's actually not that difficult to understand. A gentle smile appeared on the great Empress Vermilion Bird's face as she leaned toward Su Xiaolan and began to explain the reason behind this. Chapter 1921. The 4 holy beasts are the Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Xian Wu. They are the most powerful beings in the universe. They are immortal and eternal. I represent the one and only. There is only one being in the entire universe that can be called the Vermilion Bird. The great Empress Vermilion Bird looked at Su Xiaolan and said slowly, however, I don't represent the one and only. In fact, I'm not the one and only. Instead, it's this. The great Empress Vermilion Bird opened her tiny mouth and spat out a crimson bead. The entire heaven and earth changed color the moment the bead appeared. Enlin saw a light that was even more dazzling and majestic than the sun from within the bead. An extremely pure flame power slowly flowed within the bead. An aura of eternity permeated the air. It was as if it had existed since the beginning of the universe and had been brewing for countless years. He felt as if he were facing a supreme and indestructible god. Majestic and unique. Su Xiaolan was even more affected by the throbbing in her bloodline. This is the Vermilion Bird heart essence. The great Empress Vermilion Bird said, anyone who can fuse with the Vermilion Bird heart essence can become a holy birth. This is something that all powerful beings in the realm of stars desire. However, the one and only of my tribe is not me. It's the Vermilion Bird heart essence. Whoever possesses the Vermilion Bird heart essence can become a holy birth Vermilion Bird. Xiaolan, you can also become a Vermilion Bird, one of the 4 holy births. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's voice caused Su Xiaolan's heart to tremble. 4 holy births. She can also become one of the 4 holy births? But I'm not even at the God of Creation stage. Su Xiaolan pouted. Your growth and potential are far beyond my imagination. You've reached the Tao integration pinnacle stage in a short 100 years. I believe that with the help of the Vermilion Bird heart essence, you can quickly take the final step and reach the God of Creation stage. Then, you can become a holy birth. The great Empress Vermilion Bird looked at Su Xiaolan with admiration and mysterious confidence. Enlin was already numb to all of this. Great. She wasn't satisfied with the Tao integration pinnacle stage, and now she wanted to take 2 big steps at once? Wasn't she afraid of pulling on her balls by taking such big steps? Wait, no, Xiaolan doesn't have an egg. Enlin suddenly thought of what Su Xiaolan had told him before. She was worried that Enlin would not be able to keep up with her if she went too far on the path of seeking Tao. She was also worried that Enlin would not be able to accompany her. Enlin felt insulted at that time. But now Enlin felt a sense of crisis. What if he really couldn't keep up with Xiaolan? From an Outyen to an Outyen? The strongest son-in-law in history? How humiliating. However, it didn't seem impossible. Enlin was lost in his thoughts. Su Xiaolan expressed her confusion again. One last question. Why did you pass the sainthood to me, and what do you intend to do? A hint of melancholy finally appeared on the great Empress Vermilion Bird's smiling face. It's a long story. In any case, the sainthood is a burden to me. Pangu suppressed me. Not only did he severely injure me, but he also used some kind of technique on the sainthood to suppress my power. As long as I am still a vermilion bird, the sainthood suppression will not disappear. Thus, the sainthood is a cage for me. Only by passing the sainthood to the next successor can I eliminate Pengu's power and break free from this terrifying restriction. However, it is extremely difficult to find someone who is qualified to inherit my sainthood. Even the 6 vermilion bird sages do not have the qualifications to do so. Until I met you, the great Empress Vermilion Bird gazed tenderly at Su Xiaolan. Then, she extended her slender, snow-white hand and held onto Su Xiaolan's hand. Perhaps you're the person that the heavens sent to save me. Su Xiaolan stared blankly at the great Empress Vermilion Bird. Anlin felt as if he had been struck by lightning, and he stood rooted to the spot. The 6 vermilion bird sages felt as if their hearts had been ruthlessly stabbed by swords. This works too. Come, follow my instructions and try to touch the vermilion bird heart essence. See if you can obtain its approval. The great Empress Vermilion Bird placed the crimson bead in front of Su Xiaolan. Use the power of your bloodline and communicate with the vermilion bird heart essence. The vermilion bird heart essence will emit a corresponding light. Each type of light corresponds to a different level of adaptability. In total, there are 7 levels: crimson, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and purple. Crimson is the highest level, while purple is the lowest. When your adaptability with the vermilion bird heart essence reaches the yellow level, you can attempt to refine it. Go ahead and give it a try. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's eyes were filled with anticipation and encouragement as she looked at the azure-clothed female. Su Xiaolan gazed at the vermilion bird heart essence. From within this crimson bead, she could sense an extremely mighty power that she yearned for. Absolute light, absolute heat, absolute nobility, and absolute holiness. Furthermore, it was so unique, so beautiful. Su Xiaolan stretched out her hand and touched the crimson bead. Boom! An extremely dazzling light suddenly erupted from the vermilion bird heart essence. At first, it was purple. Then, it instantly jumped to yellow. It had reached the threshold of refinement. A hint of joy appeared on Su Xiaolan's face. At this moment, the light changed from yellow to orange. Her aptitude is actually so good. The great Empress Vermilion Bird looked at Su Xiaolan in surprise. Su Xiaolan's heart was filled with confidence. Orange should be quite outstanding. After all, yellow should be enough to refine it. Little did she know that even the 6 vermilion bird sages with top-notch bloodlines were only green in the great Empress Vermilion Bird's estimation. Orange was already an extremely freakish level of adaptability. The great Empress Vermilion Bird smiled, and was just about to speak. Suddenly, the true dragon bloodline in Su Xiaolan's body pushed against the vermilion bird bloodline. Boom! The light from the vermilion bird heart essence became more intense. Then, it gradually changed from orange to crimson red. The crimson light was so intense that it was as if countless drops of liquid were slowly flowing into the surroundings. Upon seeing this, the great Empress Vermilion Bird lost her composure for the first time. Her breathing quickened, and her gaze towards Su Xiaolan became even more scorching. Is this the highest level of adaptability? Su Xiaolan was overjoyed. It's just a mere crimson. What's there to be proud of? That's right. You're just a country bumpkin who hasn't seen the world. Our great Empress Vermilion Bird also has a crimson adaptability like you. That's because the maximum level of adaptability is crimson. Otherwise, any other color would be surpassed by our great Empress Vermilion Bird. The 6 vermilion bird sages who had eaten lemons were extremely jealous. Enough. Don't speak. The great Empress Vermilion Bird suddenly shouted. The 6 vermilion bird sages, who were chatting excitedly, instantly fell silent. However, even though they had been muted, they still straightened their necks and looked arrogantly at Su Xiaolan. It was unknown where their confidence came from. Xiaolan, let's go. I'll officially let you inherit my holy birth now. The great Empress Vermilion Bird held onto Su Xiaolan's hand with a warm expression. So soon? Su Xiaolan was a little astonished. She still hadn't mentally prepared herself for this. No, I've already prepared everything for you. All that's left is for you to embark on the path of a paragon. This is a win-win situation. Come, follow me. As she spoke, the great Empress Vermilion Bird dragged Su Xiaolan toward a certain direction. Anlin felt a strong sense of déjà vu upon seeing this. Chapter 1922. Anlin couldn't help but feel like this scene was extremely familiar. The passionate great Empress Vermilion Bird, the heavenly fortuitous opportunity, and the ignorant Xiaolan. Anlin pondered for a moment. Isn't this so similar to the first time I met Lord Luya? Holy sh*t. This isn't a trap, right? Anlin suddenly started to panic. At this moment, he saw the great Empress Vermilion Bird holding Su Xiaolan's hand and striding off into the distance. He immediately eagerly followed after them. The great Empress Vermilion Bird tilted her head toward the 6 Vermilion Bird sages and said calmly, I'm going to the Vermilion Bird spell altar with Ms. Su Xiaolan. Guard the surroundings and protect me. The 6 Vermilion Bird sages immediately lowered their heads and complied. I guarantee that I will complete this mission. I swear to serve the great Empress Vermilion Bird with my life. Is there really no way to change your mind? The 6 Vermilion Bird sages' eyes turned red as they looked toward the woman in a red feather dress. I've made up my mind. From now on, Su Xiaolan will be your Vermilion Bird. After saying this, the woman turned around and walked away without looking at the weeping 6 Vermilion Bird sages. Soon, a complicated and intricate spell formation appeared before them. This spell formation was of a very high level. It was a God of Creation stage spell formation that possessed the power to split heaven and earth. In the center of the spell formation was a statue of a soaring phoenix. It was at least 30,000 feet tall, and there was a circular spell altar on its back. Several thousand types of divine flames floated above the altar like will-o'-the-wisps, causing Anlin to gasp in amazement. Mr. Anlin, please wait outside the spell formation. Xiaolan and I will enter the Vermilion Bird spell altar to carry out the holy birth handover ceremony. The great Empress Vermilion Bird looked at Anlin with an extremely mesmerizing expression. Her words were also very difficult to refuse. No, I want to go in as well. I'm Xiaolan's personal bodyguard, literally. Anlin rejected the great Empress Vermilion Bird's proposal almost without any hesitation. How could he miss out on something as important as the succession of the saints? There was a hint of grievance on the great Empress Vermilion Bird's beautiful face. She flicked her sleeves and said, But if you get too close, you'll distract us during the holy birth handover. If that happens, it won't be worth it. Su Xiaolan stood up and said, It's okay. I'll feel more at ease with Anlin by my side. Let him stay by my side. Great Empress Vermilion Bird. This most revered being of the Vermilion Bird tribe finally relented under Su Xiaolan's insistence, but she insisted that Anlin maintain a distance of 1 kilometer from them. Soon, the great Empress Vermilion Bird and Su Xiaolan began the handover of the holy birth. The holy birth handover process was quite simple. After the great Empress Vermilion Bird found a successor, she would sever her connection with the Vermilion Bird heart essence. Then, the successor would refine the Vermilion Bird heart essence and ascend to the paramount holy birth. However, this was merely a simple process. How difficult was it to find a qualified successor that was acknowledged by the Vermilion Bird heart essence? How difficult was it to completely separate the Vermilion Bird heart essence from its original owner? This was practically a grand feat akin to stealing the heavens and replacing the sun. The risks involved in carrying out this task were simply impossible to predict. Never would Su Xiaolan have imagined that she would somehow have to inherit the holy birth of the Vermilion Bird in order to resolve her karma. Although inheriting the holy birth could free the great Empress Vermilion Bird, this could also be considered a form of repayment. However, to Su Xiaolan herself, this was also an immeasurable opportunity. Fate sure is mysterious. The mysteries of this Tao caused her to feel a little fearful. Why is my luck so good? This was the question that Su Xiaolan was currently thinking about. Following the great Empress Vermilion Bird's request, her fingers danced in the air as she constructed one divine seal after another. The great Empress Vermilion Bird also tightly shut her eyes as she chanted one mystical word after another. In any case, Enlin couldn't understand what she was saying. However, he could still sense that these syllables were connected to a certain rhythm of the great Tao of heaven and earth. The vermilion bird heart essence hovered between the two of them. It was as red as blood, and it revolved rapidly as it exuded an eternal aura. The great Empress Vermilion Bird suddenly opened her beautiful blue eyes and said, "Offer your origin blood essence to the vermilion bird heart essence, and try to make it accept you." Upon hearing this, Su Xiaolan slit her wrist and allowed her origin blood essence to flow toward the vermilion bird heart essence. Like a tiny stream of water, the blood essence fused into the crimson bead. Immediately, the bead released a demonic red glow. It flickered incessantly, and its color also became increasingly pure. Su Xiaolan let loose a muffled groan, and her features paled slightly. Even her aura had become a little feeble. The wound on her wrist had yet to heal, and the essential blood essence within her body was still being absorbed relentlessly. Enlin frowned slightly upon seeing this. His heart ached slightly. Shouldn't a few drops be enough to absorb the origin blood essence? Why does it need to absorb so much? As if to dispel Enlin's worries, the great Empress Vermilion Bird quickly explained with a focused expression, "Refining the vermilion bird heart essence is a process of putting one's life on the line. One needs to feed the vermilion bird heart essence with origin blood essence so that it will possess a large portion of the refiner's aura. Only then will the two sides be compatible. Thus, an extremely large amount of blood essence is required." Upon hearing this, Enlin's anxiety didn't subside. He looked at Su Xiaolan and discovered that she was in a very bad state. Furthermore, she was instinctively afraid and shrinking back. "Xiaolan, are you all right? Can you still hold on?" Enlin asked anxiously. Su Xiaolan's brows were tightly furrowed, and her beautiful face became increasingly pale. "I can still." Enlin was extremely worried. The holy birth and what not was secondary. Su Xiaolan's safety was the most important. With this in mind, his eyes gradually turned snow-white. Divine inspection technique. Enlin looked at Su Xiaolan's condition and discovered that Su Xiaolan's condition was very strange. Not only was her origin blood essence continuously leaving her body, but even a certain aura was also leaving her body and fusing with the vermilion bird heart essence. What was it that was leaving Su Xiaolan's body? He couldn't see through it even with his divine inspection technique. Enlin then turned his gaze toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird. He discovered that her body was enveloped by a thin membrane that completely prevented him from seeing through it. Can't see through it? Sorry, this concerns Su Xiaolan's safety. No matter what it is, I, Enlin, will see through it clearly. Enlin didn't dare to rashly interrupt the holy birth handover. However, this didn't mean that he had to accept this state of ignorance. He had to figure out Su Xiaolan's true condition. Enlin's eyes became clear and transparent. At the same time, countless pieces of information appeared before his eyes and appeared in his mind. All the secrets were seen through by his eyes. Divine simulation technique. The power of Enlin's divine sense was rapidly being consumed. He finally saw through Su Xiaolan's current condition. He also saw through the great Empress Vermilion Bird's condition. He was stunned at first. It was as if he couldn't believe everything that was happening. However, in the next instant, he immediately flared up with rage. Boom! Boundless rage seemed to be about to burst through heaven and earth. Enlin's voice pierced through the clouds. Xiaolan, stop right now. Chapter 1923. Enlin used his divine simulation technique and discovered that not only was Su Xiaolan losing her blood essence, but she was also losing her destiny and life soul. As for the great Empress Vermilion Bird, her connection with the Vermilion Bird heart essence was still extremely tight. She had no intention of severing the Vermilion Bird heart essence. No matter how much blood essence Su Xiaolan released, she couldn't refine the Vermilion Bird heart essence. At this moment, the Vermilion Bird heart essence was absorbing Su Xiaolan's blood essence, destiny, and life soul through an extremely secretive method. Then, it was feeding the great Empress Vermilion Bird. This wasn't inheriting the holy birth. This was taking Su Xiaolan's life. Enlin's roar startled the two people who were in the middle of the holy birth handover. Enlin. Su Xiaolan was slightly dazed. She didn't understand why Enlin would ask her to stop at such a crucial moment. However, she still believed Enlin's words unconditionally. She stopped the infusion of blood essence and distanced herself from the Vermilion Bird heart essence. Seeing this, the great Empress Vermilion Bird's expression changed drastically. Are you crazy? Don't stop. If you do this, both of us will suffer from the backlash of the Vermilion Bird heart essence. In serious cases, both our bodies and souls will be destroyed. Su Xiaolan didn't care and quickly retreated. She had read many things from Enlin's expression. This holy birth handover ceremony might not be like what she had imagined. Sure enough, the moment Su Xiaolan distanced herself from the Vermilion Bird heart essence, the uncomfortable feeling in her heart dissipated significantly. Even the feeling of extreme weakness and pain started to lessen. PFFF! The great Empress Vermilion Bird suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. She would indeed suffer a backlash. However, it seemed like only the great Empress Vermilion Bird suffered a backlash. What did this mean? This meant that the great Empress Vermilion Bird was still the one who truly controlled the Vermilion Bird heart essence and the entire mysterious ceremony. If the ceremony was interrupted like this, she would suffer the most intense backlash. If it really was Su Xiaolan who was refining the Vermilion Bird heart essence, then there was no way that Su Xiaolan could remain unscathed. It was more likely that Su Xiaolan had escaped from her opponent's blade. Great Empress Vermilion Bird, what a cunning move! You actually dared to absorb Xiaolan's blood essence, as well as her fate and soul. Enlin was enraged to an unprecedented level. A terrifying aura swept through the surroundings, and an aura that wasn't inferior to that of a god of creation's stage cultivator engulfed heaven and earth. A look of surprise appeared on the great Empress Vermilion Bird's face. It was as if she hadn't expected that Enlin would actually be able to see through her mystic technique. But very quickly, a ruthless look appeared on her face, and she made a grabbing motion in the direction of the fleeing Su Xiaolan. Crack! Dark red energy appeared from all directions, imprisoning Su Xiaolan in the void. This was the supreme origin power that belonged to the Vermilion Bird, and it had an absolute suppressive effect on Su Xiaolan. Her life was given to me by me in the first place. What's wrong with me taking back everything that belongs to me? A sinister smile appeared on the great Empress Vermilion Bird's face as she rapidly dashed toward Su Xiaolan. The Vermilion Bird heart essence in front of her once again erupted with a blinding light, and it stimulated the bloodline within the female's body. Su Xiaolan screamed in pain as blood spurted out from the wound on her wrist again. The Vermilion Bird heart essence greedily sucked away Su Xiaolan's blood. This time, it was brazenly sucking her blood essence, and its speed was extremely fast. Not only was it devouring her essence blood, but it was also frenziedly absorbing her fate, her divine sense, and her life force. Moreover, it was also starting to strip away her bloodline. You're seeking death. An enraged roar sounded like the roar of a heavenly god. Enlin instantly activated his 5-elemental body, and his golden wheel tore through the void. In the blink of an eye, he arrived beside the great Empress Vermilion Bird and punched her. The great Empress Vermilion Bird extended a slender hand and lightly blocked the path of Enlin's fist. Her expression was cold and indifferent. Do you really think that you're invincible just because you've subdued the 6 Vermilion Bird sages? You don't understand true power at all. Bang! The sound of bones shattering reverberated in the air. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's eyes widened in shock as she saw that her palm had already been twisted and ruptured. Boom! The fist projection exploded forth. The Vermilion Bird's spell altar was shattered into pieces by the shock waves from the fist projection. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's body was blasted back tens of thousands of meters. Su Xiaolan, are you all right? Enlin retracted his fist and looked toward Su Xiaolan. Su Xiaolan took advantage of the instant when the great Empress Vermilion Bird was injured to quickly struggle free. Then, she transformed into a bolt of lightning and increased the distance between her and the Vermilion Bird Heart Essence. The power of the Vermilion Bird Heart Essence possessed an absolute suppressive power over the power within her body. It was as if a low-level being was completely powerless before a higher-level being. I'm fine. Be careful, Enlin. Su Xiaolan's face was deathly pale as she retreated. However, she still shouted loudly. At the same time, she formed seals with her hands and unleashed millions upon millions of holy flame arrows that were powerful enough to destroy the divine Tao toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird. Everything you have was given to you by me. Everything you use is my power. How are you going to fight me? The great Empress Vermilion Bird's body came to a halt, and her battered hand had already recovered. Her blue eyes ferociously glared at the oncoming holy flame arrows. The arrows that filled the sky were instantly unable to maintain their forms under her glare, and they exploded into balls of flames where they stood. The true Vermilion Bird could perfectly suppress those who possessed the Vermilion Bird bloodline. Rip! Just as the great Empress Vermilion Bird was dealing with Su Xiaolan, a deafening ripping sound suddenly erupted. The great Empress Vermilion Bird discovered in horror that the Vermilion Bird Heart Essence floating in the distance had actually been sliced in half by Enlin's evil-slaying sword. A rich, dark red Vermilion Bird power surged into the surroundings like a flood. No! The great Empress Vermilion Bird lost her composure again. How is this possible? The Vermilion Bird Heart Essence is a unique item condensed from the Supreme Vermilion Bird's nomological laws. How could it be sliced apart so easily? Enlin laughed. The Supreme Vermilion Bird's nomological laws? Sorry, but his evil-slaying sword possessed the power to slice apart nomological laws. Coupled with his Tao sword, how could it not slice apart the unprotected Vermilion Bird Heart Essence? The great Empress Vermilion Bird immediately used all of her power to summon back the Vermilion Bird Heart Essence. Having suffered a backlash from the Vermilion Bird Heart Essence's destruction, she was severely wounded once again. Streaks of bloody wounds appeared on her body, and blood flowed continuously from them. How could Enlin and Su Xiaolan let go of such a good opportunity? Now that they had completely fallen out with each other, the only thing they could do was to kill each other. At the same time, they pounced toward the nearby Great Empress Vermilion Bird. The Great Empress Vermilion Bird swallowed the Vermilion Bird Heart Essence, which had been glued back together, into her stomach again. Then, her aura soared explosively, and the projection of a gigantic and majestic phoenix appeared behind her. Its holy and noble aura seemed as if it wanted to trample the entire heavens beneath its feet. Before Su Xiaolan had even attacked, she could already feel a suffocating might bearing down on her. She had clearly already reached the pinnacle of the Vermilion Bird Tao. However, the might unleashed by the great Empress Vermilion Bird still completely suppressed the bloodline power within her body. "Kneel!" the great Empress Vermilion Bird yelled as she looked at Su Xiaolan. Su Xiaolan felt as if a supreme god had appeared before her and demanded her to submit. Meanwhile, her bloodline had already involuntarily submitted to this being. At the same time, her legs started to move uncontrollably, and she was about to kneel down. "You kneel first." Unlin's eyes turned pure gold, and a supreme divine might crashed into the great Empress Vermilion Bird's body. This was the super divine might technique, and it could instantly make the 6 Vermilion Bird sages kneel at the same time. The great Empress Vermilion Bird lived up to her reputation as the most arrogant and powerful being. Even though she was struck by the super divine might technique, she was still able to remain standing. However, a pair of large hands had already pressed down viciously on her shoulders. Boom! The great Empress Vermilion Bird knelt down. In the instant before Su Xiaolan's knees hit the ground, she had already knelt down. Then, Su Xiaolan's knees finally hit the ground, and she completely knelt to the ground. Just like that, the two women knelt to each other. A peculiar silence ensued. Chapter 1924. Su Xiaolan was a little stunned, but she was also a little touched. She had never imagined that Enlin would actually do something as shocking as making the great Empress Vermilion Bird kneel first in order to protect her dignity. After a brief moment of blankness, the great Empress Vermilion Bird's entire body trembled uncontrollably. Had she ever knelt before anyone else? The 6 Vermilion Bird sages were at the Tao integration pinnacle stage, and they were the most powerful beings below the God of Creation stage. However, they were all fawning over the great Empress Vermilion Bird. Who could make her kneel? Yes, as one of the 4 strongest saints in the star field and the one and only Saint Seat, she was the holiest, proudest, and noblest person in the world. How could she kneel to someone else? But now, she was kneeling before a mixed-blood human. Even Enlin didn't know how much damage this had inflicted on the great Empress Vermilion Bird. PFFF. The great Empress Vermilion Bird was so furious that she spat out a mouthful of blood. The wounds all over her body split open, and blood gushed out like a waterfall. Every drop of blood was comparable to a divine item. An obvious crack had already appeared in her Tao heart. The extremely proud great Empress Vermilion Bird was actually kneeling to someone. This was a psychological blow that was no less than killing her. "I want you dead." The great Empress Vermilion Bird let out an enraged roar, and platinum-colored flames erupted from her body. These flames carried with them a might that could incinerate all things as they surged toward Enlin. "Playing with fire in front of me?" Enlin hurriedly retreated, and a scarlet divine ring suddenly appeared above his head. It contained absolute law energy that enveloped the oncoming flames. The surging platinum-colored holy flame seemed to have received an absolute command and stopped in the air. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's body trembled slightly. It was as if flames that could purify everything were burning before her eyes. "I, the Vermilion Bird, am the supreme being that wields the power of fire." She suddenly let loose a piercing cry that no human could make. Her voice was ethereal and ethereal, as if she had transcended this world. Enlin suddenly felt that the feeling of being able to control all flames had suddenly disappeared, and an extremely transcendent existence had appeared, forcibly vying for control with him. That existence also possessed an extremely supreme origin authority. A pair of dazzling wings unfurled from the great Empress Vermilion Bird's back. She walked towards Enlin with her bare feet. Lotuses bloomed with every step she took, and each lotus actually possessed the power to destroy a world. They were like raging flames, releasing an extremely shocking power. "I was born in the primal chaos of the universe and will never be extinguished. I control the flames of heaven and earth and command millions of feathers. Even if the heavens collapse and the earth are destroyed, I can still protect the southern border and let the holy might exist forever. What do you have to fight with me?" A holy mark in the form of a vermilion bird appeared on the great Empress Vermilion Bird's forehead, and she made a grasping motion toward Enlin. The holy flame that was under Enlin's control started to move again, and it roared as it pounced toward Enlin. This was the first time Enlin had used his elemental authority and lost control of it. His expression shifted drastically as he drew his evil-slaying sword and slashed down. The holy flame was split in two before quickly merging back together. Its might did not weaken at all, and it continued to give off a holy might that seemed to be able to incinerate everything as it leapt towards Enlil. Not only did this flame contain the essential power of the vermilion bird, but it also contained the eternal and indestructible property of the holy birth. Enlil felt troubled for the first time. He was clearly the heavenly fire god, a paramount being who controlled the Tao of fire. However, he was completely helpless against the flames before him. Die. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's hatred toward Enlil caused her expression to contort slightly. She clapped her hands together, and an indestructible holy flame engulfed Enlil from all directions. Then, it suddenly exploded. Boom! The earth quaked, and the white ball of flames swelled continuously like a sun as it engulfed everything in its surroundings. Heat-resistant plants, powerful flame beasts, and flaming terrain were all annihilated by this attack. Not a single one survived. However, in the center of the holy flame sun, a blade of wind and snow suddenly tore open a passageway. Power of all creation. Myriad phenomena with a single thought. Since he was unable to control the flames, he would use other powers to fight against the great Empress Vermilion Bird. In any case, apart from the power of the fire god, Enlil still had 6 other powers that he could use. The wind and snow parted a path. Enlil transformed into a bolt of golden void lightning and approached the great Empress Vermilion Bird at a terrifying speed. At the same time, his fist was imbued with the boundless power of the 5 elements, and he punched toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird's face. The speed of the power of lightning and the power of the phenomenal success divine body combined to unleash a might that surpassed that of an ordinary god of creation's attack. "You can actually break through my holy flame?" A ferocious expression appeared on the great Empress Vermilion Bird's face. It was as if there was no power behind her fist as heaven and earth instantly darkened. Boom! A shock wave spread out in a ring-shaped manner, tearing apart everything in its path. The power of the 5 elements and the domineering brute force clashed and tore at each other. Enlil's attack this time was much more powerful than the previous one. However, he had crippled the great Empress Vermilion Bird's hand last time. This time, however, they were evenly matched. Not only was the great Empress Vermilion Bird good at playing with fire, but even her physical body was comparable to the 5 elemental body of the war god at the phenomenal success divine body of the war god. This made it impossible for Enlil to target the great Empress Vermilion Bird's physical weakness. After this collision, the two of them were both knocked back by the tremendous force. Enlil knew that the great Empress Vermilion Bird could be even more powerful. However, she had been severely wounded during the battle with Pangu, and she had yet to recover from her injuries. Moreover, the Vermilion Bird heart essence had also been shattered by his attack. This caused her to be even with Enlil. Just as these thoughts were running through his mind, countless crimson flaming feathers suddenly pierced toward him. The great Empress Vermilion Bird actually launched another attack as she was knocked back. Her wings flapped rapidly, and countless crimson, blood-like feathers shot out. Each flaming feather was comparable to the sharpest divine tool, and they were capable of tearing through everything. Enlil's heart jolted, and he gave up on the idea of using his physical body to defend against the flaming feathers. Instead, he drew his evil-slaying sword and slashed out a dense sword net to block the flaming feathers' attacks. However, the might of the flaming feathers' attacks was far too terrifying. Every time they collided, it was as if a god of creation had unleashed a full-force attack. Even Enlil's arm felt like it was being torn apart. In the end, a flaming feather managed to escape and ruthlessly stabbed into Enlil's waist. Not only was the feather as hard as a divine tool, but it also contained a holy rank Vermilion Bird power that could melt through anything. Rip, Enlil's body of the war god was sliced open. The flaming feather pierced through his divine body, and a wisp of the vermilion bird's origin power surged into his body through the wound. He was just about to purge this wisp of power. The great Empress Vermilion Bird suddenly smiled. "I've finally caught you." Origin blood splashed out from her body and condensed into a crimson holy seal in the sky. A light enshrouded both Enlil and the great Empress Vermilion Bird. Blood sacrifice, Vermilion Bird holy forbidden technique, boundless reincarnation flames. Construct karma, spatial displacement. Enlil was just about to resist when he discovered that the Vermilion Bird's power was desperately trying to teleport him away. In fact, the Vermilion Bird even expended a huge amount of its origin power. Under the impact of the torrential energy, the remnant Vermilion Bird power in his wound connected with the Vermilion Bird power in the outside world. This caught Enlil off guard. When Enlil came to his senses again, he had already been teleported to another location in the Vermilion Bird star system. To put it more accurately, he had been teleported to the interior of a terrifyingly powerful sun. Chapter 1925. The unimaginably high temperature instantly charred Enlin's skin black. Enlil was subjected to a frenzied pressure and impact within the core of the sun. This was not ordinary sun-true flames. It wasn't like he had never eaten ordinary suns before, but these flames were far less terrifying than this. There was no life, no space, and no matter within these incessant flames. There were only flames that could incinerate everything and were imbued with the ability to reincarnate endlessly. Enlin's appearance was like a foreign object. The power of the entire sun was repelling and attacking Enlil, trying to incinerate and erase this foreign object. As such, the attacks that Enlil was facing were unimaginably overwhelming. Arg! Enlil endured unimaginable pain, as if his body was going to melt and evaporate in the next second. He immediately used his heavenly fire power to try and control the flames of this sun, only to find that it was F*King ineffective. The flames of this sun contained the absolute will of the Vermilion Bird, and it was not under his control at all. Or rather, he was not powerful enough, so the power of his laws was not strong enough. Not only that, but this sun also dragged Enlil into a strange burning reincarnation cycle. No matter how he moved, he would return to the core of the sun in the next second. There was no way he could escape. Enlil wanted to use his sword to slice open the sun, but the flames immediately healed as soon as they were split apart. Flames could also reincarnate, and they could reincarnate from death to life. He could only use his other 6 heavenly fire powers to form a protective barrier and desperately resist the onslaught of the flames. This was a terrifying flame-killing formation. Even if Enlil could withstand the onslaught of the flames, he would eventually be unable to withstand the endless onslaught. When that time came, it would be his doomsday. As this sun burned Enlil, it didn't forget to slowly revolve around the Vermilion Bird planet. It was also a member of the 9-star system. At this moment, the neighboring star suddenly exclaimed in surprise. The Vermilion Bird used the reincarnation sun to deal with that human? That's making a mountain out of a molehill. Using this kind of mystic technique will not only reduce the user's life essence, but it will also affect their own Tao. It can be said that this is a technique that kills 1,000 enemies while inflicting 800 casualties on oneself. You're actually willing to pay such a price in order to drag your enemy into the reincarnation flames and torture them to your heart's content. Is your enemy too strong, or is your hatred too deep? Fixed Star ridiculed softly, then used his penetrative vision to look at the situation inside. Seeing that the other party was still stubbornly holding on, Fixed Star could not help but reveal a look of surprise. Strange cultivation, strange divine body, strange power, everything about this human is strange. Just where did this peerless monster pop out from? Could it be Taichu? The Vermilion Bird clearly only wanted to absorb her inheritor's bloodline, but who would have thought that it would involve such a freak? Sigh. What a pity. He shouldn't have provoked the Vermilion Bird so quickly. Fixed Star sighed regretfully, and then suddenly fell into hesitation. Should I save him? Should I save him or not? Forget it. Everything has its own destiny. If he dies, then so be it. Who told him to provoke the vermilion bird? Just be careful in your next life. Eternal Star shook its head regretfully, giving up on the idea of rescuing Enlin. Meanwhile, on the immortal Vermilion Star, Flame Heart Immortal Realm, after the great Empress Vermilion Bird dragged Enlin away, her cold eyes turned toward the nearby Su Xiaolan, and a faint smile appeared on her face. All right, I've finally gotten rid of that annoying fly. Now, only you and I are left in this world. Enlin won't be killed by you so easily. Su Xiaolan looked at the great Empress Vermilion Bird as her fingers continued to carve divine patterns on her body. The great Empress Vermilion Bird walked toward Su Xiaolan step by step, and her terrifying holy birth aura crushed down upon the latter's body. Her face was still filled with endless greed and hatred. What a perfect person! Your development has already far surpassed my imagination. If it weren't for the fact that I urgently need a pure bloodline power, perhaps I really would have made you my successor to the holy birth. The great Empress Vermilion Bird placed a finger on her luscious red lips, and her scorching gaze wandered over the great Empress Vermilion Bird's body. If I absorb everything of you into my body, I'll definitely be able to make up for my incomplete body. That's right, I kneel to you. However, if I eat you and fuse you into my body, then you'll become a part of my Vermilion Bird. Isn't that equivalent to kneeling to myself? That way, I'll still be the proudest, noblest, and purest me. Su Xiaolan's lips twitched. Even at a time like this, she's still brooding over kneeling to me? Come, become a part of me. The great Empress Vermilion Bird spat out the Vermilion Bird Heart essence again. The crimson bead slowly rotated, exuding a boundlessly enchanting light. This caused Su Xiaolan's bloodline to throb, and she wanted to throw herself into the Vermilion Bird Heart essence like a moth flying into a flame. A determined expression appeared on Su Xiaolan's face as she gripped her dragon sparrow sword tightly. You still want to resist? The great Empress Vermilion Bird chuckled. Everything you have was given to you by me. What are you going to use to fight against me? She pressed down toward the nearby Su Xiaolan. Kneel. Boom. The supreme decree of the great Empress Vermilion Bird fell upon Su Xiaolan's body. As expected, Su Xiaolan's Vermilion Bird bloodline would immediately submit to her. Moreover, Su Xiaolan's body would also kneel toward her. Sure enough, Su Xiaolan's knees began to bend. However, in the next instant lightning crackled. The earth exploded. Su Xiaolan charged toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird at an incredible speed. Her dragon sparrow sword was imbued with a boundless dragon might, and it slashed down toward the Vermilion Bird Heart essence like the roar of a divine dragon. Boom! An extreme sharpness tore at the Vermilion Bird Heart essence in a frenzy. The location of her slash was the exact location where Enlin had struck the Vermilion Bird Heart essence. Cracks appeared once again. Tearing open an old wound was much easier than creating a new one in an undamaged location. The Vermilion Bird Heart essence that had just healed with great difficulty was once again destroyed. By the time the great Empress Vermilion Bird reacted, it was already too late. The dragon sparrow sword had already sliced the Vermilion Bird Heart essence in half. No! The great Empress Vermilion Bird roared hysterically as she swatted a palm toward Su Xiaolan. Su Xiaolan raised her sword in front of her, and a boundless power caused the dragon sparrow sword to tremble violently. Her body flew backward, but she still opened her mouth at this moment. Roar! The green dragon's breath was like a surging flood that instantly engulfed the great Empress Vermilion Bird's body. However, in the next instant, a scorching holy flame exploded and incinerated the flood of dragon's breath. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's expression was extremely dispirited, and she swallowed the Vermilion Bird Heart essence again. However, she continued to vomit blood. Impossible! This is impossible! How can you still attack me? Su Xiaolan stopped in her tracks, and her dragon sparrow sword swam through the air like a lightning dragon. When Enlin was fighting against you, why did you engrave divine patterns on my body? It was to seal the damned vermilion bird bloodline in my body. You can command the vermilion bird bloodline, so I'll seal it. Semi-transparent golden jade-like dragon scales started to appear on Su Xiaolan's snow-white skin. Dragon horns started to appear on her head, and her voice was cold and proud. Everything I have was given to me by you? I'm sorry, but even without the vermilion bird bloodline, I can still torture you. Crack. The jade pendant of the Azure Dragon tribe's guardian deity was shattered by Su Xiaolan. Chapter 1926. The main star of the Azure Dragon tribe, the Dragon Origin Star. This was a mighty star that would never be destroyed. It suddenly trembled lightly. Then, an immeasurable star power pierced through space and directly landed on the azure-clothed female on the immortal vermilion star. Not only that, but the Tao realm true intent, mind power, and mysterious fortune of the entire Azure Dragon tribe all started to strengthen the azure-clothed female's body. Su Xiaolan crushed the guardian deity Jade Pendant, which allowed her to temporarily obtain the power of a god of creation. At this moment, she was truly a guardian deity who was under the protection of the Azure Dragon tribe. She was a true god. Great Empress Vermilion Bird, I came here to settle my karma with you. I wanted to repay you. Even if you took away my Vermilion Bird bloodline, I wouldn't have any complaint. But you wanted to absorb my fortune, absorb my soul, and take away everything I have. A pair of azure dragon wings appeared on Su Xiaolan's back. The dense holy patterns on the wings shone with a dazzling light, and the aura of the origin azure dragon soared into the sky. I'm sorry, but we're enemies now, Su Xiaolan roared. Her eyes became pure gold, and her dragon might transformed into golden ripples that swept through the entire immortal vermilion star. The divine Tao avatar then appeared, condensing into a boundlessly majestic azure dragon that existed eternally in the universe, entrenched on the planet. This scene terrified all the living beings on the immortal vermilion star. Some were knocked unconscious by the azure dragon's aura, while others flew around in fear. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! My God! Such a huge dragon! Is this the azure dragon's true body? Hurry and run! Leave this star! Many of the vermilion bird tribe living beings had already lost their minds in fear. The 6 vermilion bird sages and Mo Hai hurriedly rushed toward the vermilion bird spell altar. Then, they saw the great Empress Vermilion Bird confronting Su Xiaolan, and they were completely dumbfounded. The scene unfolding before their eyes had exceeded their imaginations. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's feathers were drenched in blood, and the dragon-horned Su Xiaolan was exuding extremely terrifying auras. What's going on? Why are they fighting? The Vermilion Bird spell altar's formation had the ability to isolate itself from the outside world and conceal the movements within. Initially, the great Empress Vermilion Bird planned to quietly devour Su Xiaolan. However, who would have thought that Su Xiaolan would actually draw upon the power of the dragon origin star and materialize an azure dragon? In the end, the outside world still discovered what was happening inside. Is this really Su Xiaolan? Mo Hai felt that his outlook on cultivation had received an unprecedented blow. He knew that Su Xiaolan was powerful, but he couldn't imagine that she was powerful enough to fight against a supreme being of the Vermilion Bird tribe. The little girl who used to follow him around and call him senior brother was now able to battle against a being that even the Vermilion Bird sect had to look up to. The great Empress Vermilion Bird is in danger. Let's go and save her. Kill! Eliminate these despicable and treacherous humans. The 6 Vermilion Bird sages roared with rage as they pounced toward Su Xiaolan. However, they were stopped by the Vermilion Bird spell altar's spell formation. The Vermilion Birds were instantly embarrassed. The great Empress Vermilion Bird refused to let us help. This is a battle that belongs to Great Empress Vermilion Bird. She doesn't need our help at all. Yes, that must be it. Su Xiaolan is just a slightly bigger worm in front of her. Wouldn't it be an insult to her if we help her without permission? Let's just wait here for the results of the battle. The 6 Vermilion Bird sages immediately thought things through, and they began to converse in a relaxed manner. Mo Hai suddenly panicked. Only now did he realize that he and the 6 Vermilion Bird sages seemed to be standing on opposite sides. If they were to deal with him, Mo Hai swallowed his saliva discreetly and moved to hide behind a rock. You can't see me. You can't see me, as expected. The 6 Vermilion Bird sages didn't look at him, or rather, they couldn't be bothered to look at him. Compared to the Great Empress Vermilion Bird's battle, Mo Hai wasn't worth their attention even for a second. At this moment, the azure dragon on the immortal Vermilion Star had already lowered its head and was staring at the Great Empress Vermilion Bird. A tremendous dragon might instantly cause the earth around the Great Empress Vermilion Bird to cave in. Suppressed by the boundless dragon might, the Great Empress Vermilion Bird's bloodline started to churn, and a desire to contend against it surfaced in her heart. This is the projection of the azure dragon holy birth. An expression of astonishment appeared on the Great Empress Vermilion Bird's face. Isn't this a power that only the guardian deities of the azure dragon tribe can wield? How can you? Rip! The void trembled. Su Xiaolan instantly appeared before the Great Empress Vermilion Bird. Her hand formed into a dragon claw, and an azure holy light tore through everything like lightning. The azure dragon in the sky also struck out with its claw at the same time. At this moment, it was as if Su Xiaolan had transformed into a real azure dragon, and a boundless azure dragon power surged furiously toward the Great Empress Vermilion Bird. The Great Empress Vermilion Bird suddenly folded her wings and wrapped them around her body. Boom! Lightning, clouds, and gales exploded at the same time. The Great Empress Vermilion Bird groaned in pain, and her body flew back like a streak of light. Then, she crashed heavily into the spell formation of the Vermilion Bird's spell altar and spat out another mouthful of blood. Great Empress Vermilion Bird! No! The 6 Vermilion Bird sages stared at this scene in astonishment. The Great Empress Vermilion Bird was actually sent flying by Su Xiaolan? She was sent flying by a human woman? Heh! Great Empress Vermilion Bird, are your injuries already that severe? Su Xiaolan smiled faintly. Her breathing was like billowing clouds as she quickly adapted to her newfound power. The Great Empress Vermilion Bird. You two shameless B****stards. Each of you sneak attacked me once, and you still have the cheek to say such things? Su Xiaolan raised her chin, and her hands transformed into agile dragon claws. A destructive power that could tear apart an entire planet surged as she charged toward the Great Empress Vermilion Bird again. Cut the crap! I'm going to tear you apart! The projection of an azure dragon danced around Su Xiaolan's body, and the projection of the azure dragon holy birth strengthened the sky. At this moment, her power was extremely domineering, and she was like a mini Tyrannosaurus Rex as she stabbed her claws toward the Great Empress Vermilion Bird. The Great Empress Vermilion Bird's hands became crimson gold in color as she quickly blocked Su Xiaolan's attack. Boom, boom, boom! The collision between the two of them was earth-shattering, and it was as if a series of thunderclaps had erupted. Just the energy that escaped from their clash was enough to shatter the void and shatter mountains and rivers. This was a direct clash between the paramount azure dragon power and the paramount vermilion bird power. When Bai Shui and Qi Yu activated their guardian deity jade pendants, they could both unleash power comparable to a god of creation stage mighty figure. Su Xiaolan had undergone the baptism of the dragon Dao Pond and reached the Dao integration pinnacle stage. Her power alone was already superior to Bai Shui and Qi Yu's. Now that she activated her guardian deity jade pendants, how could a normal god of creation stage mighty figure compare to her? Even though she was facing a holy birth vermilion bird, especially a severely wounded one, she wasn't afraid in the slightest. Azure Dragon Holy Technique, Star Plucking. Su Xiaolan suddenly grabbed toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird, and a terrifying suction force erupted from her claws. It was as if she wanted to grasp everything before her in her hands. Rip! Su Xiaolan tore off a large handful of feathers from the great Empress Vermilion Bird's wings. The great Empress Vermilion Bird flared up in rage upon seeing this. This was like a girl tearing off her clothes in a fight. This was a massive humiliation. Chirp! The great Empress Vermilion Bird shrieked. The feathers in Su Xiaolan's hands suddenly erupted with a blinding light. Crap! Su Xiaolan's expression changed drastically, and she was just about to fling the feathers away. Boom! The feathers exploded. A ball of holy flames that was even hotter than the sun engulfed Su Xiaolan's body. Chapter 1927. Su Xiaolan flew out from the holy flame explosion in an extremely disheveled manner. Her entire body was covered in varying degrees of burns, and a portion of her dragon claw had been burnt off. An azure holy light enveloped her wounds. Then, it unleashed an extremely powerful healing power to treat her burns. However, she didn't even get a chance to catch her breath before another frightening energy fluctuation erupted from in front of her. A red figure dashed toward Su Xiaolan at an incredible speed. Like a divine sword piercing through the air, it ruthlessly stabbed toward her heart. Su Xiaolan twisted her body, and a black figure instantly appeared before the red figure. Boom! The great Empress Vermilion Bird's arm was bent by the massive force. She focused her gaze and discovered that a golden dragon tail covered in scales had appeared before her. "Do you not want to be a human anymore?" The great Empress Vermilion Bird roared in rage. Her other hand swiftly broke through Su Xiaolan's defenses and slammed into her chest. Su Xiaolan felt as if a burst of explosive energy was going to instantly annihilate her. However, before this power could destroy her body, an azure dragon power that flowed like water started to quickly neutralize the great Empress Vermilion Bird's power. Bam! Su Xiaolan was sent flying by the great Empress Vermilion Bird's slap. At this moment, 90% of the great Empress Vermilion Bird's power had already been neutralized. However, there was still another 10% that was wreaking havoc within her body. This power was enough to destroy any Dao integration stage super mighty figure. However, Su Xiaolan relied on her freakish physical body to forcefully resist it. Whoosh! The sound of space exploding could be heard. The great Empress Vermilion Bird appeared before Su Xiaolan again. Her expression was one of arrogance and ferocity, and an extremely terrifying aura engulfed Su Xiaolan's body. Then, Su Xiaolan saw the great Empress Vermilion Bird's figure instantly flash in 99 different directions and unleash 99 different attacks. Each of these attacks contained a supreme divine ability that targeted her unique weakness. Su Xiaolan injected all of her azure dragon power into the dragon sparrow sword. The sword projection was like water, but it was also like a swimming azure dragon. It surged incessantly and accurately blocked all of the great Empress Vermilion Bird's attack. Again and again. They collided again and again. The two of them were becoming more and more evenly matched. In particular, after Su Xiaolan had gotten used to this immense power, she became more and more adept at dealing with the great Empress Vermilion Bird's attack. From time to time, she could even unleash counterattacks that caused even the great Empress Vermilion Bird to shudder in fear. The great Empress Vermilion Bird was extremely sullen. Never in her wildest dreams would she have imagined that she would be able to fight evenly with someone who she had previously regarded as a piece of meat. Even though she was severely wounded and had expended a lot of energy to kill Lin, it was still a piece of cake for her to torture a weak god of creation. However, the power that Su Xiaolan had just unleashed was not something that a weak god of creation could compare to. Su Xiaolan's current power was slightly more powerful than Heavenly Monarch Bei Luo's. Therefore, a scene that shocked billions of living beings appeared. Right now, the entire Vermilion Bird star system knew that the great Empress Vermilion Bird was battling a powerful being from the Azure Dragon tribe. The immortal Vermilion Star was a planet that had been reinforced by layers upon layers of laws. It was extremely sturdy, and even if tens of thousands of high-yield nuclear bombs were to fall on it, it wouldn't even scratch an itch. However, the immortal Vermilion Star was currently engulfed in a destructive aura. The tectonic plates were shifting and trembling incessantly, and it looked as if the entire star was about to collapse. Kacha boom! The Vermilion Bird spell Altar's formation was destroyed. Su Xiaolan and the great Empress Vermilion Bird soared into the sky at the same time. They transformed into two streaks of light, one green and one red, and they continuously collided with one another. Every time they collided, it was as if a small sun had exploded. Without the restriction of the Vermilion Bird spell Altar's spell formation, the destructive power of their battle was no longer restrained, and the shock waves of their battle began to wreak havoc on the immortal Vermilion Star. Azure Dragon Ancestral Aura. Su Xiaolan opened her mouth and exhaled toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird. An azure golden breath that contained the power of time soared into the sky. It was as if it were the boundless river of the galaxy, eternal and inextinguishable. Even the great Empress Vermilion Bird's protective holy flame was torn open by this azure dragon ancestral aura. She sensed a fatal threat from this breath. She couldn't take it head-on. The great Empress Vermilion Bird instantly entered into an extremely mystical state. She was ethereal and untraceable like smoke. When the azure golden breath crashed into her body, it was as if it had crashed into a wisp of smoke and instantly disappeared. Su Xiaolan's dragon scales stood on end. She had detected a presence that was rapidly approaching her. Furthermore, this presence was using a method that was even faster than spatial skipping. Primal Chaos Flash. The great Empress Vermilion Bird appeared in front of Su Xiaolan. Her slender hands intertwined to form a Vermilion Bird's soaring holy seal. Then, she ruthlessly imprinted this seal onto Su Xiaolan. Su Xiaolan slashed her sword toward the sky. However, she was greeted by the sight of a Vermilion Bird that could blot out the entire sky with its wings extended. This Vermilion Bird carried a boundless origin power as it pounced toward her. Then, it crushed her into the ground. This power was far too vast, and Su Xiaolan was completely unable to dodge it. Boom! An earth-shattering crimson energy shockwave erupted and engulfed everything in the surroundings. Countless living beings died amid blood-curdling screams, and one towering mountain peak after another was instantly razed to the ground. When the energy shockwave dissipated, a Vermilion Bird insignia had appeared in the ground within a radius of 5,000 kilometers. Su Xiaolan stood in the center of the crater and panted heavily as she held onto her sword with both hands. She actually blocked it. The great Empress Vermilion Bird in the sky was even more astonished. Her breathing was also slightly chaotic as she narrowed her eyes and looked down at Su Xiaolan. Great Empress Vermilion Bird, we've come to assist you. Charge! Kill this despicable human. The 6 Vermilion Bird sages spread open their wings and pounced towards Su Xiaolan with powerful might. Azure Dragon Holy Technique. Descending dragon raises its head. Su Xiaolan's sword moved along with the dragon. At some point in time, the gigantic azure dragon that occupied the entire immortal Vermilion Star had already arrived behind Su Xiaolan. Then, it raised its head and soared into the sky. The great Empress Vermilion Bird suddenly self-detonated, and boundless milky white holy flames engulfed the entire sky. An extremely noble and proud crimson Vermilion Bird descended from the sky with boundless origin flames around it. In this instant, it was as if the billions of living beings in the Vermilion Bird star system could see the collision between an azure dragon and a Vermilion Bird. The collision between the azure and crimson energies tore the heavens and earth into azure and crimson colors at the same time. Heaven and earth were annihilated. Save me! The 6 Vermilion Bird sages, who had just arrived to assist the Great Empress, were blasted flying by the terrifying shock waves from the collision between the two vermilion birds and Great Empress vermilion birds. The massive immortal vermilion star was also blasted into oblivion by the shock waves from the collision. This caused the star to deviate from its original orbit, and it became a wandering immortal vermilion ball. Mo-Hai fled with all his might, and that was why he hadn't been killed by the shockwaves. He looked behind him with lingering fear in his heart. He could only see boundless destruction and disaster, as well as the scenes of two gigantic holy beasts clashing and tearing at each other. Everything else had been replaced by an azure and a crimson color. In the boundless universe, only two things were real. The azure dragon roared as it circled the star, and the vermilion bird's wings covered the sky as it let out a clear cry. This scene was like a primordial painting. It was beautiful, majestic, and boundless. It was a kind of dynamic eternity, and it gave off a feeling of surrealism. Chapter 1928. Unlin was still trapped in the star. He used almost every method he could think of to break through the reincarnation flames of the star, but to no avail. The flames of reincarnation crazily attacked the heavenly gods' defenses. They were boundless, and their strength was even slowly increasing. Their attacks didn't seem to be weakening at all. If this went on, Unlin really wouldn't be able to hold on much longer. The commotion caused by the battle between the vermilion bird and the azure dragon had already reached the inner part of the star he was on. Little Lon has already used her final trump card. If she can't defeat the Great Empress Vermilion Bird, she'll be in grave danger once the time limit for her explosive technique expires. Unlin was extremely worried. What could he do? Was there any other way to break through this endless reincarnation force? If this sun was an ordinary sun, Unlin would have swallowed it in a matter of minutes. In any case, it was not like he had never swallowed it before, so he would not be as conflicted as he was now. Wait a minute, swallowed? That's right. Why can't I swallow the boundless reincarnation fire? Unlin didn't know much about other things, but when it came to food, he always took it one step at a time. The power of the boundless reincarnation fire was much more terrifying than the sun essence, but his own strength was also much stronger. He should be able to swallow it. Let's have a taste first. Unlin opened his mouth and activated an engulfment spell technique. At the same time, the shadow of a huge black void whale appeared behind him. He was using the unique power of the void beast in his sea of vital energy. His devouring talent was extremely powerful, and there was a high chance that he could devour the power in front of him into his sea of vital energy to safely digest it. A jet-black vortex began to suck in the flames in front of it. The scorching platinum flames in front of him surged crazily, and were then sucked into the vortex. Unlin was overjoyed when he saw this. He thought to himself, boundless reincarnation fire, reincarnation immortal. I want to see how you can reincarnation immortal in my stomach. Rumble. The platinum flames rushed into his energy sea. The extremely hot flames instantly illuminated the entire Chi sea. Then, the flames began to spread and attack in a frenzy. Within his sea of vital energy, the little whale, the holy flame vermilion bird, Ankiran, little Xian Wu, and little white tiger were all given a fright by the flames before unleashing attacks to suppress them. Roar, 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 woo, 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 crackle. Unlin noticed to his shock that they were still barely able to hold on at the beginning, but as they absorbed more and more of the boundless reincarnation flames, they were utterly unable to withstand the attacks of the flames, and they started to let out shrill cries repeatedly. The boundless reincarnation fire was like a huge river that crazily rushed into the whirlpool that Unlin had released. Within the sea of vital energy, the flames of reincarnation burned Ankiran and the other pets to death. Then, Ankiran and the other pets were revived by the special properties of the sea of vital energy before being burned to death by the flames of reincarnation again. Resurrection and death, death and resurrection, resurrection and death, death and resurrection. Unlin didn't know whether the boundless reincarnation flame could reincarnate on its own, but he knew that the boundless reincarnation flame had allowed Kiran and his other pets to experience the true cycle of life and death. Little pets like Little White Tiger and Little Black Tortoise that had just entered the Chi Sea were already in tears. Why was the sea of energy so scary? No one had told them before. Mama, it was so scary. I want to go home. Unlin's heart ached as he looked at the pets in the sea of vital energy. Then, he continued to devour the flames of reincarnation flame. I'll have to trouble them for now. Once I save their mama, I'll save the disaster in the sea of energy. Unlin released his divine sense and roughly assessed the situation of the reincarnation flame. The results were very satisfactory. Its volume had already shrunk by 1%. This meant that the flames of reincarnation flame had been isolated by a special power after entering his sea of vital energy. As a result, it was unable to reincarnate. With this in mind, Unlin excitedly increased his rate of devouring. He opened his mouth wide and devoured the boundless flames of reincarnation flame at a rate that could fill an entire Pacific Ocean. 10 minutes later. Burp, erg. Unlin suddenly felt nauseous and began to vomit violently. The flames of reincarnation flame filled his sea of vital energy, burning everything in its path. Even the liquefied vital energy in his sea of vital energy was evaporated into gas. When a liquid becomes a gas, it will expand. Right now, Unlin felt like his sea of vital energy was expanding to the point where it hurt. If he continued to devour the flames of reincarnation flame like this, his sea of vital energy would explode in less than a minute. No, he was going to die if he continued like this. Unlin looked at the sun to find that it had only shrunk by 8%. There was no way he could devour all of it. What do I do? What do I do? I can't eat anymore. Unlin was burning with anxiety. Was there a way to completely devour the flames of reincarnation flame without taking up too much space in his sea of vital energy? A thought suddenly flashed through Unlin's mind, and he thought of a way. If he hadn't been forced into a corner, he wouldn't have even thought of this method. He was a little conflicted about this power, and he was a little conflicted about this identity. However, he didn't have time to think too much now. He had to give it a try. Unlin's heart suddenly transformed into a vast expanse of nothingness. Any mighty figure at the Return to Void pinnacle stage possessed their own power of the divine Tao. Did Unlin have one? He did too. His power of the divine Tao was darkness. Pure darkness began to appear beneath Unlin's feet. The darkness slowly proliferated and sucked in everything around it. It was very peaceful. There was no sound. There was no violent energy. Everything was proceeding in complete silence. It was impossible to describe what kind of darkness this was. The flames of reincarnation flame possessed the ability to reset everything and enter the cycle of reincarnation and rebirth. However, in the face of this power of darkness, it was completely unable to put up any resistance. It was sucked in and completely disappeared. True darkness represented absolute nothingness. It represented that apart from darkness, no other element was allowed to exist. Everything that was devoured by darkness would be transformed into nothingness. Unlin was shocked to discover that when he unleashed his divine Tao of darkness, the speed at which the flames of reincarnation flame was devoured was over 100 times faster than when he used his power of engulfment. Furthermore, the flames of reincarnation flame completely disappeared after being sucked into the darkness. Even Unlin didn't know where the flames had gone. It was as if even their existence had been wiped away. What terrifying power! Unlin was shocked by his own power. He knew that his divine Tao of darkness had an engulfment effect, but he didn't expect it to be so terrifying. Even the flames of reincarnation flame were unable to withstand it. At this moment, a star outside the reincarnation sun suddenly opened its eyes. This is impossible. The star was astonished. The flames of reincarnation are rapidly decreasing. What's going on? What did he do? The reincarnation sun was shrinking at a rate that was discernible to the naked eye. One had to realize that every star was hundreds or even thousands of times larger than a planet. What did it mean for the reincarnation sun to shrink so rapidly? Devouring a planet in one gulp? What a joke! Chapter 1929. This powerful being that had transformed into a sun suddenly became extremely panicked. The fact that it was able to call the prideful Great Empress Vermilion Bird by her name, and the Great Empress Vermilion Bird didn't show any signs of disgust, was a testament to its status. It had lived for countless years, and it had seen countless bizarre things. However, it had never encountered a being that could swallow a sun so quickly. Furthermore, this wasn't an ordinary sun. It was the reincarnation sun that possessed the power of reincarnation. As it thought about this, the reincarnation sun's body became thinner. At the same time, the light it exuded also began to dim. It was as if it were about to die of old age after expending all energy. The powerful being that had transformed into a sun was truly panicking. It saw the darkness within the reincarnation sun. It felt as if it wanted to swallow everything, as if it wanted to reduce everything to nothingness. A boundless sense of danger welled up in its heart. Too mysterious, too powerful. This human's power was far beyond the powerful being's imagination. How had the reincarnation sun's flames been swallowed? Where did the flames go and how did they disappear? It really couldn't understand. Even Enlin didn't understand what was going on, let alone Little White. Although Enlin had grasped the true intent of darkness and attained the paramount law of darkness, he still had very little understanding of true darkness. If he tried to delve deeper into it, he would feel as if his entire being would be engulfed by darkness. It was as if his entire existence was about to be erased. This was also why he was subconsciously afraid of using this power. The powerful being that had transformed into a sun was already slowly moving away from the reincarnation sun. To be honest, if any of the 8 stars outside of the Vermilion Bird planet were going to die, it wouldn't have thought that the reincarnation sun was going to die. After all, this was determined by the unique properties of the stars. Reincarnation represented indestructibility. Even if a god of creation stage super mighty being smashed it for hundreds of years, the reincarnation sun would definitely not feel any pain. But now the neighboring reincarnation sun brothers looked like they were about to die. The powerful being that had transformed into a sun didn't dare to be its neighbor anymore. It immediately ran far away, afraid that the power of darkness would contaminate it. The reincarnation sun became smaller and smaller. Finally, a crackling sound rang out. Pure darkness pierced through the boundlessly dazzling sun. The reincarnation sun that had burned for countless years was finally engulfed by darkness. Absolute darkness appeared in the universe, as if it would continue to spread outwards. The big shot that had turned into a sun felt that the surrounding light, the 8 great stars, and the billions of galaxies seemed to have disappeared in an instant. What entered its eyes was an endless void. This scene made its hair stand on end. It had never heard of such pure dark force before. Fortunately, the darkness disappeared in the next second. Only the white-robed figure was still floating in the universe. He was very, very small, but the big boss sun could not ignore his existence at all. His entire body seemed to be shining brighter than the sun. "It's over. Vermilion Bird, you've King kicked an iron plate," the sun god muttered. Meanwhile, on the immortal Vermilion Star, the battle between Su Xiaolan and the great Empress Vermilion Bird continued. The azure holy light that contained the azure dragon's origin power clashed violently with the scarlet holy light that contained the Vermilion Bird's origin power. The terrifying energy impact caused the giant planet, which had been reinforced by layers of laws, to become dilapidated. Half of the 6 Vermilion Bird sages' bodies were paralyzed by the aftershocks of the battle, and they reluctantly retreated from the battlefield. No matter how stubborn they were, they had no choice but to admit that Su Xiaolan was powerful. The great Empress Vermilion Bird had already released her true form. With a flap of her wings, she transformed into a vermilion bird that was several million feet tall. Su Xiaolan also stopped being a human. Her body perfectly fused with the projection of the Azure Dragon Holy Birth. With her body as the core and the power of the Azure Dragon as her flesh and blood, she controlled the star-coiling dragon and tore at the vermilion bird before her. Their battle gradually moved away from the immortal vermilion star. This was the great Empress Vermilion Bird's intention. Su Xiaolan also did not want the immortal vermilion star to be destroyed. There were too many living beings on this planet who could not escape in time. Their battle would destroy this planet. Thus, their battle moved from the immortal vermilion star to the boundless outer space. Their battle had already reached the realm of returning to one's natural state. Like wild beasts, they madly rammed into each other. Moreover, they used their claws to tear and their mouths to bite. From time to time, they would unleash some powerful and extravagant divine abilities. However, all of this was in preparation for taking a bite out of the other party. The vermilion bird's power of flames was the strongest. As Su Xiaolan's azure dragon body pierced through the vermilion bird's domain of flames, her incredibly tough scales had already been charred black. However, she did not cower in the slightest. Instead, she rushed toward the vermilion bird and bit down. The vermilion bird wanted to flap her wings and escape. However, the azure dragon's tail had already circled around the vermilion bird's back and sealed off her escape route. Bam! The azure dragon's tail was like a huge palm that ruthlessly slapped the vermilion bird's back. The vermilion bird screamed in fear, and her gigantic body involuntarily plummeted forward. The azure dragon's gigantic mouth was already upon her, and it ruthlessly bit down on the vermilion bird's neck. Like countless divine weapons, the azure dragon's densely packed teeth pierced into the vermilion bird's flesh, causing blood to spurt out. Chirp! The vermilion bird screamed in anguish as she frantically flapped her wings. Suddenly, a boundless amount of high-temperature flames erupted from her body. These flames spread in all directions, and her entire body transformed into an extremely hot crimson sun. Su Xiaolan's bite on the vermilion bird's body felt like she was biting a sun. It was extremely uncomfortable. However, she did not let go. Instead, she continued to bite down on the vermilion bird's neck. Furthermore, she continuously sucked the vermilion bird's blood through her teeth that had pierced into the vermilion bird's flesh. Every mouthful of blood was extremely nutritious, and it was as if she had consumed a high-rank immortal pill. Su Xiaolan, tonk 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 tonk. She continued to gulp down mouthfuls of blood. Chirp! The great Empress Vermilion Bird screamed in anguish. Her wings crossed as she furiously smacked Su Xiaolan's head. However, Su Xiaolan continued to bite down on the vermilion bird's neck and gulped down mouthfuls of blood. The vermilion bird was going to absorb her blood essence and bloodline? Then she would suck the vermilion bird's blood dry. The neck was one of the vermilion bird's fatal weaknesses. How could Su Xiaolan possibly let go? This was the moment where victory and defeat would be decided. The great Empress Vermilion Bird was forced into a desperate situation, and a ruthless expression appeared on her face. "Nanli Vermilion Bird Flame," she yelled. Vermilion Bird Nanli's body suddenly trembled. Then, he let out a wail of anguish. The bloodline in his body burned furiously as it was stripped away from his body. Then, it soared into the sky and gathered beside the great Empress Vermilion Bird. The other 5 Vermilion Bird sages all revealed expressions of shock and horror. The great Empress Vermilion Bird was extracting Vermilion Bird Nanli's bloodline? Vermilion Bird Nanli would die if she did that. Immediately afterward, however, a nightmare struck. Yu Luo Vermilion Bird Flame. Bing Xian Vermilion Bird Flame. Tian Xian Vermilion Bird Flame. Illusory Gold Vermilion Bird Flame. Tai Jing Vermilion Bird Flame. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's voice was like a supreme divine decree. None of the vermilion birds could disobey her will. The bloodlines of the 6 vermilion bird sages started to burn involuntarily. They wailed in anguish, but they were still unable to stop their bloodlines from being stripped away. Then, they charged toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird. Soon, 6 different bloodlines started to burn around the great Empress Vermilion Bird's body. They quickly transformed and condensed into 6 different holy rank spears. Each spear was over 1,000,000 feet long, and they pierced through heaven and earth. Not only did they contain the terrifying power of flames, but they also contained the 6 vermilion bird sages' bloodlines as well as the Tao realm that the 6 vermilion bird sages had comprehended in their entire lives. Even the vermilion bird itself didn't know just how terrifying all of this combined with the power of the vermilion bird's essence was. After all, this was an attack that the 6 vermilion bird sages had sacrificed. Su Xiaolan, it's all over. Bloodline forbidden technique, universe-shattering spear. The great Empress Vermilion Bird laughed sinisterly. Then, the 6 holy spears trembled slightly. Then, they simultaneously descended toward Su Xiaolan. Chapter 1930. The 6 spears pierced toward the Azure Dragon, who was biting down on the great Empress Vermilion Bird's neck. The power of each holy flame spear could easily slice apart a gigantic planet. Su Xiaolan had no way of dodging, and her body was pierced by the 6 spears in the blink of an eye. A searing pain erupted throughout her entire body, causing her to tremble. Her mouth, which was biting down on the vermilion bird's neck, also opened in pain. The space-shattering spear didn't just possess extreme sharpness. Extremely powerful flames were also its unique characteristic. The explosive sharpness began to ravage the Azure Dragon's body. The spears that had pierced through the Azure Dragon's body began to release their power of flames. The piercing was only the prelude. The explosion was the main point. This was a violent, tsunami-like destruction. The Nanli fire stripped away everything. The Yu Luo fire corroded flesh and blood. The Bing Xian fire froze one's body. The Tianjin fire incinerated everything. The Huanjin fire penetrated one's entire body, and the Taijing fire scorched one's consciousness. In an instant, Su Xiaolan felt 6 different types of extreme pain. The power of each type of flame was terrifying enough to kill a god of creation. As the holy flame spears exploded, they incessantly pushed the Azure Dragon's gigantic body forward, leaving behind 6 rainbow-like trails of flames in the boundless outer space. It was a magnificent sight. In the end, the 6 holy flame spears ruthlessly nailed the gigantic Azure Dragon into the immortal Vermilion Star. The immortal Vermilion Star suffered another destructive blow. Not only did the Azure Dragon crash into it, but the 6 holy flame spears also pierced through the Azure Dragon's body. From afar, it looked as if a huge red ball was being crushed by the Azure Dragon and pierced through by the 6 brightly colored flame spears. Howl! The Azure Dragon roared in pain and indignation. The Vermilion Bird looked down at the nailed Azure Dragon with a cold expression. It's over. Now it's time to eat. When the 6 vermilion bird sages saw that their bloodlines could actually unleash such a powerful power that even the legendary Azure Dragon was nailed to the immortal Vermilion Star, their resentment turned into fanaticism. Is this my true power? It's amazing. It can actually suppress the Azure Dragon. Su Xiaolan, do you see this? My power is piercing through your flesh and torturing your body. You are nothing in my eyes. Wah! Thank you, great Empress Vermilion Bird. You've shown me how powerful I can become. I'll give up everything for great Empress Vermilion Bird. Everything is for great Empress Vermilion Bird. The 6 vermilion bird sages had been forced to extract their bloodlines. They were clearly on the brink of death, yet they still turned into bootlickers and loudly expressed their intentions. It doesn't matter how the goddess treats me. I'm willing to eat instant noodles for the goddess. Everything the goddess did was right. Even if it wasn't right, it was still worth forgiving. The great Empress Vermilion Bird slowly descended. Waves of heat swept over, and half of the immortal vermilion star was scorched red. Her every move would cause a natural disaster. But now she couldn't care less. There was only one thing she wanted to do, and that was to kill Su Xiaolan and eat Su Xiaolan. Boom! The gigantic azure dragon's body couldn't bear the pressure, and it disintegrated into specks of azure light. The coiling star dragon completely disappeared. Along with it, the power of the Azure Dragon tribe, the projection of the Azure Dragon Holy Birth, and the star power of the Dragon Origin Star also disappeared. The great Empress Vermilion Bird was momentarily dazed. Then, she looked at Su Xiaolan, who was riddled with wounds, and a vibrant smile appeared on her face. In the end, it's still a borrowed power. The most dazzling and powerful moment of your life has already become history. The current you probably can't even defeat the 6 Vermilion Bird sages, right? The great Empress Vermilion Bird quickly shrank and transformed back into a voluptuous woman in a crimson feather dress. Step by step, she walked toward the woman in the azure dress, whose aura was becoming weaker and weaker. I've paid an unimaginable price for this battle. Even eating everything of yours won't be enough to make up for it. Although there was a smile on the great Empress Vermilion Bird's face, her eyes were extremely cold. Tell me, how should I thank you? Su Xiaolan crawled up from the ground with great difficulty. The 6 holy flame spears were still embedded in the immortal vermilion star, and they were like 6 pillars of fire that rose from the boundless earth, exuding a boundless flame might. The only good thing about the Azure Dragon's body being destroyed was that it had successfully avoided being burned by the holy flame spears. You don't need to thank me, because Mayan Lin will thank you properly. Su Xiaolan wiped away the blood from the corners of her mouth, and a beautiful smile appeared on her flawless face. Unlin, the great Empress Vermilion Bird couldn't help but burst into laughter. That arrogant idiot was burned to death by the reincarnation sun a long time ago. Do you really think he can escape and save you? As she spoke, she spat out a crimson bead. The vermilion bird heart essence had appeared once again. However, this time, there was an extremely conspicuous crack on its flawless surface. Even with the great Empress Vermilion Bird's current abilities, she couldn't even repair this crack on the surface of the vermilion bird heart essence. From this, one could imagine just how pitiful the vermilion bird heart essence was. The great Empress Vermilion Bird was also in despair. She wanted to perfectly extract Su Xiaolan's bloodline and fuse it into her own body. She had to release the vermilion bird heart essence to absorb it. However, she never would have thought that she would be ambushed twice in a row, and this caused her to be even more severely injured. However, everything was over now. It was finally going to end. Not only am I going to extract your vermilion bird bloodline and extract your fortune, but I'm also going to squeeze your flesh and blood dry. Moreover, I'm going to imprison your divine sense and burn it for billions of years before devouring you. The great Empress Vermilion Bird leaped towards Su Xiaolan with a cold smile on her face. Even if you want to die, I won't let you have an easy death. Just like how I dealt with Enlin, I'll imprison you in the reincarnation sun and make your divine sense suffer the pain of being incessantly burned by the reincarnation sun. You won't be able to die even if you beg for it. This is the consequence of opposing me. Su Xiaolan wasn't afraid or flustered in the slightest. Instead, she was extremely happy. She smiled and said, "You keep talking about the reincarnation sun, haven't you noticed that one of the stars in the sky is missing?" The great Empress Vermilion Bird's footsteps faltered, and she raised her head in a daze. Then, she slowly opened her mouth. The battle just now had been too intense, so she didn't have time to pay attention to the changes in her surroundings. Now that Su Xiaolan mentioned it, she immediately discovered an extremely unbelievable scene. How is this possible? Where's the reincarnation sun? Impossible! This is impossible! Everything that was happening before her eyes was beyond her understanding. Just as her mind was in turmoil and her mind was about to fall into absolute shock and confusion, Unlin, who had secretly used the void body mantra, suddenly appeared near the great Empress Vermilion Bird. The power of the 5 elements erupted, and the evil-slaying sword ruthlessly slashed toward the Vermilion Bird heart essence. By the time the great Empress Vermilion Bird reacted, it was already too late. "No!" the great Empress Vermilion Bird screamed. Crack boom! The Vermilion Bird heart essence was ruthlessly sliced into 2 by the sharp sword. Chapter 1931. The nightmare reappeared. The great Empress Vermilion Bird had originally thought that the probability of the Vermilion Bird heart essence being severed twice was already close to 0. Never would she have imagined that it would happen a 3rd time. What did the Vermilion Bird heart essence do wrong? Why do you keep hacking at it? Unlin spun his sword and was about to hack at it again. The great Empress Vermilion Bird, who had just come to her senses, let out a clear cry and made a grabbing motion in the air. The 2 halves of the Vermilion Bird heart essence were summoned, and they instantly flashed over to the female's mouth. The female opened her red lips and swallowed the bead again. Her movements couldn't be any more practiced. Erg! Then, the great Empress Vermilion Bird started vomiting blood. The Vermilion Bird heart essence had been severed for the 3rd time, and the terrifying backlash almost killed her. How could Unlin let go of such a rare opportunity? He immediately wielded his evil-slaying sword and unleashed his 5 elemental body and heavenly god powers. Then, he pounced toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird and unleashed a flurry of attacks. The great Empress Vermilion Bird was about to go crazy. She vomited blood as she defended against Unlin's attacks. She was in an extremely sorry state, and there was still an expression of disbelief on her face. Why were you able to escape? What did you do to my reincarnation son? In the blink of an eye, the female's snow-white skin had been slashed in a dozen or so places. However, she was still unwilling to give up. The scene before her eyes had far exceeded her understanding. What did I do? I ate it, Unlin replied indifferently. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's pupils contracted. I'm impossible. Unlin's sword intent swept through the air, and the power of the 5 elemental bodies bombarded the female's body. He sneered. Apart from saying that it's impossible, what else can you say? Erg. The great Empress Vermilion Bird vomited another mouthful of blood at Unlin. Unlin swung his sword, and the 2 halves of blood suddenly erupted with a dazzling crimson light. Boom! The blood exploded, and the extreme Vermilion Bird origin power instantly incinerated everything in the surroundings. Every drop of the Vermilion Bird's blood contained energy that even Tao integration stage super mighty figures couldn't withstand. One could imagine how powerful the explosion of this mouthful of blood was. The great Empress Vermilion Bird didn't want to attack Unlin by vomiting blood. After all, this was a technique that dealt a heavy blow to the enemy and a heavy blow to herself. However, she was currently in a state of panic and anxiety. In addition to the backlash from her heart essence, she was originally going to vomit blood, so she decided to make use of the blood. Rip! A streak of black light sliced through the Vermilion Bird origin power. Unlin's body was charred black as he rushed out from the explosion. He continued to swing his sword toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's eyelids twitched, and a rare hint of retreat appeared in her heart. She had suffered repeated setbacks, and her confidence in this battle had slowly fallen to the bottom. Su Xiaolan had reached the Tao integration stage and had even become the guardian deity of the Azure Dragon tribe. This was already incomprehensible to her. Now, Unlin had actually destroyed the Samsara Sun. This was even more beyond her understanding. Every time she tried to spit out her Vermilion Bird heart essence, it would be ambushed. She was so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. But when she thought about it carefully, only an extremely powerful enemy would be able to cause her so many accidents. In other words, she had completely underestimated the strength of these 2 people. Right now, her condition was already extremely poor. She couldn't even use the power of the vermilion bird heart essence. As proud as she was, she couldn't guarantee that another unbearable accident wouldn't occur when she killed these two people. A temporary retreat? This thought finally surfaced in the great Empress Vermilion Bird's mind. In terms of fleeing speed, the Vermilion Bird was definitely the fastest in the realm of stars. In fact, she was even faster than the other three holy beasts. If she wanted to flee, apart from Pangu, no one could catch up to her. But was she really going to flee? The great Empress Vermilion Bird's body trembled uncontrollably as she struggled internally. Fleeing meant that she was no match for these enemies. Even if there were countless reasons, it would still mean that she was afraid of these enemies. These enemies had humiliated her. Her extreme pride wouldn't allow her to do such a thing. Universe-shattering true spears. The great Empress Vermilion Bird suddenly roared in anger. The 6 heaven-shattering holy spears stabbed into the immortal Vermilion Star were pulled out again. Under the command of the great Empress Vermilion Bird's will, they rapidly shrunk and condensed. From their original size of 10 million feet, they shrunk to 1,000,000 times their original size. Then, they became thin and long spears that were only 10 feet long. Extremely compressed energy and extremely compressed might cause the energy density of each spear to become terrifyingly high. In fact, the surrounding void even formed a collapsing vortex of destruction. It was as if the entire world was going to be destroyed. Go! The great Empress Vermilion Bird quickly retreated. With a wave of her hand, the 6 terrifying spears, which carried with them the might to tear apart the universe, stabbed toward the nearby Enlin. Enlin furiously slashed his sword toward one of the spears. Boom! Enlin felt a boundless power that made his heart palpitate. What he slashed wasn't a spear. Rather, it was a divine tool that could easily tear apart the world. The web between Enlin's thumb and forefinger split open, and he almost lost his grip on his sword. His body was quickly knocked back by the immense power contained in the spear. The holy flame contained within the spear also spread along the evil-slaying sword to his entire body. Then, it quickly started to burn him. Ah! Enlin howled in pain from the scorching heat. He had to admit that the spears before him were truly terrifying. They had the power to easily wound him. At this moment, the other 5 spears had already whizzed toward him. An indescribable rage burned in Enlin's heart as he sensed the terrifying piercing power of the spears and the pain caused by the flames. Was Su Xiaolan tortured by these 6 terrifying spears? When he rushed over, he saw the scene of the azure dragon being pierced by the 6 holy spears. He saw Su Xiaolan screaming in anguish as she was nailed to the immortal Vermilion Star and burned by the 6 holy flames. Now that he had personally experienced the might of the spears, he was even more furious. It was also at this moment that he saw the great Empress Vermilion Bird flap her wings. Then, she transformed into a streak of red light and fled into the distance. This scene caused Enlin's expression to change drastically. The great Empress Vermilion Bird is actually trying to escape? Now, they were already enemies. If he allowed the great Empress Vermilion Bird to successfully escape and recuperate from her injuries, she would definitely become an extremely terrifying enemy. I can't let her escape. I can't let her escape no matter what price I have to pay. This was the only thought in Enlin's mind at this moment. The great Empress Vermilion Bird was indeed fleeing. The holy beast's intense desire to live had defeated her pride, and she had chosen a strategic retreat. However, she had already sworn a vow in her heart. When the two of them met again, she would do everything in her power to exact vengeance on them, no matter the cost. In fact, she was even willing to give up massive benefits and join forces with the 4 holy beasts to hunt them down. She was going to capture the 2 of them alive and then torture them endlessly. Only then could she wash away the humiliation she had suffered today. Just as she was thinking this, the great Empress Vermilion Bird's feathers suddenly stood on end, and a boundless sense of danger enveloped her entire body. She was being stared at by something terrifying. Chapter 1932. Just what kind of feeling was this? Just who could bring such a feeling to the vermilion bird? Boundless darkness, boundless depth. She was extremely close to death. It was as if her existence was going to be erased from this world in the next instant. Darkness blotted out the sky. The scorching earth also turned into darkness where nothing could be seen. There was no heat, no light, no matter, and no space. The great Empress Vermilion Bird was still frantically fleeing. Her fiery wings, which radiated with the Vermilion Bird origin power and holy light, looked as if they would be engulfed by the darkness in the next instant. She turned her head with great difficulty and saw a scene that both terrified and enthralled her. Behind her was a man who wore a black divine robe and wielded his evil-slaying sword. With a single slash of his sword, he obliterated the 6 holy spears. His eyes were a pair of black and white fish, and they were like the eyes of a deity. His aura wasn't very powerful, but it was as if he had transcended beyond this world. He was extremely ethereal and unfathomable. The great Empress Vermilion Bird was enthralled by this man's aura. This was an aura that she yearned for. However, she was also terrified at the same time. This was because the man had already pointed his sword at her, and she had nowhere to run. Everything around her was pitch black. Wherever the darkness was, the man's attack range would be. She didn't know what to do to escape this boundless darkness. This was Enlin's high-rank war god mystic technique, Dark Immortal Transformation. After Enlin obliterated the 6 holy spears, his sword continued to slash toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird. 3 seconds of true man. Every moment was extremely precious. Die! Enlin roared in rage as he slashed his evil-slaying sword toward the fleeing great Empress Vermilion Bird. The great Empress Vermilion Bird knew that she couldn't escape, so she instantly turned around and transformed into her true form. Her wings spanned over 10 million feet, and a sinister expression appeared on her face. Copious amounts of blood burst forth from her body, transforming into boundless blood flames capable of incinerating the universe. I'm going to kill you! Hongli blood flames! If the great Empress Vermilion Bird ignited her bloodline, she could materialize a space-shattering true spear that could pierce through the azure dragon. However, this time, the great Empress Vermilion Bird ignited her own bloodline. How many times more powerful would it be than the space-shattering true spear? Never fight a god of creation to the death. This was something that all gods of creation were well aware of. The other party could choose to escape if they were no match for him. However, if he forced the other party into a desperate situation, and the other party fought back with all his might, it was very likely that he would be consigned to eternal damnation. But now, Enlin had forced a god of creation with a holy birth to fight to the death. The threat of a disaster like this was countless times more terrifying than if a god of creation were to be hounded to death. The Hongli blood flame was over 100 times hotter than the holy vermilion flame that the Vermilion Bird had unleashed in the past. Not only was the Hongli blood flame indestructible, but it was also able to proliferate endlessly. Even if the darkness was boundless, the Hongli blood flame would still be able to expand without end. This light was brighter than planet Suzaku and could pierce through the darkness. This was an attack that the Vermilion Bird had sacrificed its path and ignited its bloodline. This was an attack that could kill a god of creation stage cultivator. Rumble! The blood-red flames collided with Enlin's sword technique. The surging blood flames instantly swallowed the black sword light, and then surged madly towards Enlin. The great Empress Vermilion Bird spread her wings, and she laughed with resentment and satisfaction. Ha ha! Good! Burn him for me! She had only just finished speaking when the crimson flames before her were inexplicably sliced in half. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's mouth gaped open in shock. Before she could figure out what was going on, everything around her had sunk into absolute darkness. She couldn't see anything, and she couldn't sense anything. Even the pain only lasted for an instant. Then, everything completely disappeared. She couldn't even sense her own existence. This was even more terrifying than death. Disappear. No! The vermilion bird screamed in horror. Boundless terror started to spread through her entire body, and her expression changed drastically as she flapped her wings continuously. However, it was all too late. Her enormous body, which seemed to cover the sky, had already split into the deepest darkness from the middle. Then, the darkness spread and engulfed her chest, engulfed her wings, engulfed her bare feet, engulfed her head, and finally, even her consciousness was engulfed. Eternal and boundless darkness was her only home. The darkness dissipated. The vermilion bird, which was so gigantic that it could engulf an entire planet, had already completely disappeared. Silence reigned over the boundless heaven and earth. Waves of heat surged, and only a white-robed figure stood silently. His body seemed extremely frail and fragile, but he still gripped his sword tightly in his hand. The entire vermilion bird star system witnessed the scene of a boundless and majestic vermilion bird being engulfed by darkness before completely disappearing. They were shocked and bewildered. On the immortal vermilion star, the 6 vermilion bird sages were shaking their heads in agony and disbelief. Where's the great Empress Vermilion Bird? Is she dead? No, the great Empress Vermilion Bird won't die. Unlin, you shameless bastard! Hurry up and release our great Empress Vermilion Bird. If you have the guts, then fight fair and square. Don't always play dirty tricks. The mighty great Empress Vermilion Bird is invincible. No one can break her legend. We will wait here for her return. The 6 vermilion bird sages were still hooting. Even though they were already in an extremely pitiful state, they still had to open their mouth. Whoosh, a rain of blood fell from the sky. Every drop of blood contained an extremely rich vermilion bird Tao realm. Phenomena of a god of creation falling began to appear. The 6 vermilion bird sages had been slapped in the face. Their eyes were red and swollen, and tears streamed down their faces as they stared at this unimaginable scene. All of the living beings in the vermilion bird territory began to realize that the vermilion bird had fallen. Even though the phenomena had already appeared, they still couldn't believe that this was reality. A rain of blood fell from every planet in the vermilion bird star system. The phenomena began to spread from the vermilion bird star system to the rest of the star systems. This time, the scope of the phenomena was even larger than what Enlin had seen last time. It covered hundreds of millions of planets in the southern region of the realm of stars. A rain of blood fell from all of the planets. All of the living beings on the planets were suddenly enlightened. One of the 4 holy beasts, the vermilion bird, had already fallen. Following this, they were filled with uncontrollable grief. The fall of the vermilion bird was a super major event that shocked the entire realm of stars. Furthermore, the phenomena brought about by its fall weren't just limited to the southern region of the realm of stars. Instead, they quickly spread to the entire boundless realm of stars. The vermilion bird took control of the southern region, and the skies of all the planets in the southern region were dyed blood red. Regardless of whether it was day or night, it was as if the skies in the southern region had been dyed red with blood. All of the living beings in the universe were struck by a boundless sense of grief. This wasn't the fall of a god of creation. Instead, it was the fall of a holy god of creation. The entire universe was grieving. Of course, the most grief-stricken were the living beings of the vermilion bird tribe. All of the living beings in the vermilion bird star system were sobbing. The source of their bloodline had been severed, and the being they revered the most had fallen. This was such a heavy blow that many of the vermilion bird tribe living beings chose to commit suicide on the spot. They were the proudest tribe, and the bloodline that flowed through their bodies was the source of their pride. Furthermore, the great Empress Vermilion Bird was the goal that they pursued their entire lives. Now, even their ultimate goal had fallen. One could imagine just how heavy a blow this was to their Tao hearts. At least 1/10 of the vermilion bird tribe living beings in the vermilion bird star system had chosen to commit suicide. The phenomena of the great Tao of heaven and earth that signified the death of a Tao integration stage super mighty figure also began to appear. However, Enlin didn't have the leisure to pay attention to these things. He looked toward the direction where the great Empress Vermilion Bird had disappeared. Chapter 1933. At the location where the great Empress Vermilion Bird had disappeared, a crimson bead slowly floated in the air. That's right, the great Empress Vermilion Bird had died, but her Vermilion Bird heart essence remained. The Vermilion Bird heart essence was in tatters, but it managed to withstand Enlin's dark immortal strike. The Vermilion Bird heart essence was the only thing that existed in the entire universe. It was something that all living beings yearned for. It was a supreme treasure that could drive even gods of creation crazy. It was also a prerequisite for gods of creation to advance to the holy birth. Even though Enlin didn't have any Vermilion Bird bloodline, he was still extremely tempted. Enlin took a step forward. Then, an extreme sense of dizziness and weakness instantly engulfed his entire body. His body swayed slightly, and he was about to fall backward. The dark immortal transformation had depleted all of his energy. Right now, he couldn't even fly toward the Vermilion Bird heart essence. Enlin, are you all right? A crisp and sweet voice traveled over from behind him. Enlin fell into a soft and warm embrace. Enlin shook his head and urged, I'm fine. Xiaolan, hurry and take the Vermilion Bird heart essence. It's a good thing. Su Xiaolan looked up at the crimson bead in the air, and her sealed bloodline began to throb uncontrollably. Even Enlin couldn't resist it, so Su Xiaolan's bloodline was extremely compatible with the Vermilion Bird heart essence. This was a fatal temptation. Xiaolan, this is a rare opportunity. Hurry and refine it. Enlin urged excitedly. Can I really do it? Su Xiaolan was extremely uneasy. She had just experienced a fierce battle, and she was currently in a weakened state. Furthermore, she had been tricked by the great Empress Vermilion Bird using the Vermilion Bird heart essence, so she was extremely wary of the Vermilion Bird heart essence. Furthermore, she had sliced the Vermilion Bird heart essence in half before. Who knew if the Vermilion Bird heart essence would hold a grudge? Believe in yourself. You can do it. Enlin was still encouraging him. When Su Xiaolan heard Enlin's words, she immediately undid the seal on the Vermilion Bird bloodline in her body and released the complete and pure Vermilion Bird bloodline. Rumble! The pure aura of the Vermilion Bird bloodline began to spread. The Vermilion Bird heart essence in the sky suddenly began to tremble violently. It was already an ownerless object, and it could choose an existence that was compatible with it as its successor. The Vermilion Bird bloodline aura released by Su Xiaolan was exactly what it liked. Su Xiaolan was a little confused. Speaking of which, how did he refine the Vermilion Bird heart essence? The method that the great Empress Vermilion Bird had taught her was clearly not the correct way to refine the Vermilion Bird heart essence. Thus, the question was, how was she supposed to refine the Vermilion Bird heart essence? Just when Su Xiaolan was at a loss. Whoosh! The Vermilion Bird heart essence suddenly tore through space and hurtled toward Su Xiaolan. Su Xiaolan was given a fright. She hadn't summoned the Vermilion Bird heart essence, but the Vermilion Bird heart essence was charging toward her? Did it have to be so bold? At the very least, it had to have the pride of a supreme Vermilion Bird. Su Xiaolan was still very nervous. She didn't know whether the Vermilion Bird heart essence was charging toward her out of kindness or malice. What if the Vermilion Bird heart essence also wanted to harm her? As the Vermilion Bird heart essence drew closer and closer, she inexplicably began to read a lot of emotions from the crimson bead before her. These were emotions that only possessors of the purest bloodline had the right to read. Vermilion Bird heart essence. Boss. Want me? Su Xiaolan. The crimson bead grew anxious upon seeing the woman's cold expression, and it continued to release its emotions. Vermilion bird heart essence. I'm severely injured right now, and I don't have an owner. I urgently need the nourishment of an owner's power. In the entire vermilion bird tribe, only you have the right to possess me. Furthermore, your bloodline is comparable to the great Empress Vermilion Bird's perfect successor. So, hurry up and accept me. Swallow me and transfer me to your heart. Use your heart's blood to refine me, and you'll be able to fuse with me. Su Xiaolan's eyes lit up slightly. She was just struggling to figure out how to refine the vermilion bird heart essence, and it was voluntarily telling her? But I'm only at the Tao integration pinnacle stage right now. Can I really refine you? Su Xiaolan asked hesitantly. Of course you can. You don't necessarily have to be at the God of Creation stage to obtain a holy birth. It's just that we usually look down on living beings that aren't even at the God of Creation stage. However, you've changed my mind. The vermilion bird heart essence replied with excitement. As it spoke, its body suddenly showed signs of cracking again. It instantly panicked again, and it flew around Su Xiaolan while releasing its emotions. There's no time to hesitate. Hurry up and refine me. If you don't absorb me, I'm going to die soon. Su Xiaolan raised her eyebrows with a smile. The vermilion bird heart essence is an eternal and undying treasure. You're still alive even after the great Empress Vermilion Bird perished, and now you're telling me that you're going to die? Who are you trying to fool? Vermilion bird heart essence. All right, I was exaggerating a little. The crimson bead trembled lightly as it tried to express its emotions with great difficulty. This is equivalent to a human possessing an undying ability. However, his body is sliced in half at the waist, and his blood splatters all over the ground. He crawls on the ground, bleeding as he crawls. He's in extreme pain, and his life essence is constantly being drained away. Although he has an undying hack, it's no different from being on the brink of death. Su Xiaolan stroked her chin and nodded. That's a very apt analogy. The vermilion bird heart essence was on the verge of tears. Is this the time to talk about this? Can't you see that I'm crawling around in front of you while dragging my bloody body that's been sliced in half? Hurry up and save me. Let my body heal. All right. Su Xiaolan opened her dainty mouth and swallowed the vermilion bird heart essence. Then, she silently transferred it to her heart to refine it. However, she hadn't even refined it for a minute before rich vermilion bird essential power erupted from the vermilion bird heart essence. Moreover, an extremely holy and ethereal aura fused into her entire body. Boom! A crimson pillar of light soared into the sky. Su Xiaolan once again became the center of the storm, sweeping up winds and clouds in a radius of over 10,000 kilometers. A peculiar bloodline aura proliferated and resonated with the great Tao of heaven and earth. The 6 vermilion bird sages were all dumbstruck upon seeing this. The vermilion bird heart essence was swallowed by Su Xiaolan? She even received the acknowledgement of the vermilion bird heart essence? No. Stop her. We can't let the vermilion bird heart essence fall into the hands of despicable humans. The 6 vermilion bird sages yelled as they writhed on the ground. However, their bloodlines were completely depleted, so they couldn't even approach Su Xiaolan. However, just because they couldn't do it didn't mean that other powerful beings couldn't do it. 3 Tao integration stage vermilion birds poked their heads out of the cloud. Their eyes were like stars, and they looked down greedily at the 2 humans on the ground. The 2 of them have just battled the great Empress Vermilion Bird, so they're at their weakest right now. That male can't even stand. As for that female, she's lost the power of the Azure Dragon, and she's also been severely wounded. Right now, she's busy refining the vermilion bird heart essence, so she can't spare any attention. Her combat prowess is also close to 0. This is our last chance, and also our best chance. Chirp. Kill them. Avenge the great Empress Vermilion Bird. The 3 Tao integration stage vermilion birds roared as they tore through the thick layer of clouds. With a terrifying might, they ferociously pounced toward Enlin and Su Xiaolan. There was one thing they didn't say. The vermilion bird heart essence was theirs. Chapter 1934. If it were Enlin and Su Xiaolan at their peak condition, these 3 Tao integration stage vermilion birds wouldn't dare to charge toward the two humans even if they were given 10,000 times the courage they had. However, things were different now. Enlin and Su Xiaolan didn't even have critical health left. Instead, they only had a sliver of health left. They had a total of 10,000 health left, but they only had 1 health left now. Furthermore, they had been silenced and weakened. How could they resist the urge to kill them? What a joke! They were going to be the last hit kings. For Great Empress Vermilion Bird. For the honor of the Vermilion Bird tribe. Die, die, die. The flames of the 3 Tao integration stage vermilion birds made the entire sky change color. Su Xiaolan's body shuddered, and an expression of remorse appeared on her face. She was just about to forcibly stop the vermilion bird heart essence refinement process when a warm hand gently patted her head. "Don't get distracted. I'm here," Enlin said with a serious expression. Su Xiaolan was slightly dazed. "You even needed someone to support you when you were walking, and you had to kneel down even when a soul formation stage bird appeared. How were you going to defend yourself against 3 Tao integration stage vermilion birds?" However, a sense of security welled up in her heart at the sight of the white-robed man standing in front of her with a sword in his hand. Even though Enlin was unreliable at times, he was still very reliable in times of need. Su Xiaolan discarded all distracting thoughts and placed her trust in this extremely feeble man as she continued to refine the vermilion bird heart essence. The 6 vermilion bird sages all yelled with elation at the sight of the 3 Tao integration stage vermilion birds. "Good job! You're going to be the greatest heroes of our vermilion bird tribe. Charge! Eat those 2 despicable humans alive!" Not only were the 6 vermilion bird sages extremely excited, but the remaining vermilion bird tribe living beings on the immortal vermilion star, as well as the other vermilion bird tribe powerful beings wandering in outer space, also turned their gazes toward the 3 super mighty figures. It was as if these 3 were the hope of their tribe. Enlin held 3 first-grade immortal pills in his mouth as he pulled out a high-rank immortal sword from his storage ring. "Ha ha! In this state, you still want to use your sword to kill us? Stop struggling. Do you think the amount of primordial qi you're using now is comparable to the amount of primordial qi a deity transformation rookie uses? Give up resisting, and we'll let you die more comfortably." When the 3 vermilion birds saw Enlin's reaction, they couldn't help but burst into laughter. Enlin raised his head and smiled. "Do I need to use my vital energy to deal with you guys?" Bang! The high-grade immortal artifact suddenly exploded. Countless fragments that looked like white ice crystals exploded with an extremely terrifying sword intent. Sword burial. Heavenly Sea Extreme Ice. The fragmented sword blades of the peak immortal level shot into the sky, transforming into streaks of clear and transparent extreme chill heavenly swords. Their sword intents had reached the pinnacle, and their sword might pierced through the sky. Wherever the heavenly sword passed, the void froze and all things fell silent. "No! How is this possible?" The 3 vermilion birds' expressions changed drastically as all of their feathers stood on end. They unleashed scorching flames toward Enlin and Su Xiaolan like heavenly flames, only to be pulverized by the extreme chill heavenly swords. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The heavenly swords continued onward and tore the bodies of the 3 Tao integration stage super mighty figures into shreds. They didn't even get a chance to cry out before they were torn to shreds before being frozen into chunks of frozen flesh that crashed heavily to the ground. Boom boom boom, heaven and earth wailed with grief as Tao integration stage super mighty figures fell. Everything had happened far too quickly. It was so fast that the elated and excited smiles on the faces of some of the vermilion bird tribe living beings were still frozen in time, creating an extremely comical sight to behold. 3 Dao integration stage super mighty figures had been insta-killed? The 6 vermilion bird sages were slapped in the face again, and their mouths gaped open as they stared at the scenes unfolding before their eyes. It was as if they had lost all of their faith. Unlin had killed 3 Dao integration stage super mighty figures with a single strike? What happened to him running out of tricks? What happened to him being forced into a corner? Why did he look so feeble? How could he be killed? All of the vermilion bird tribe powerful beings were astonished. In their eyes, Unlin did indeed only have 1 drop of health left. However, in their eyes, this battle had become. Unlin only had 1 drop of health left, and the 3 Dao integration stage vermilion birds felt like they had a huge advantage. The 3 Dao integration stage vermilion birds charged toward Unlin. Miss, Unlin had only 1 drop of health left. 3 kills. Who could survive that? All those who dare to attack Xiaolan must die. Unlin positioned himself in front of Su Xiaolan as he spoke in a cold voice. His voice wasn't very loud, but all of the powerful vermilion bird tribe powerful beings shuddered upon hearing this. A chill ran down their spines as they were intimidated by his aura. No one dared to speak again. The chaotic energy was still wreaking havoc on the dilapidated planet. Unlin's white robe flapped violently in the turbulent energy, and his body swayed slightly, as if he was about to be overwhelmed by the turbulent energy. However, none of the vermilion bird tribe powerful beings dared to attack Unlin again. Unlin and his sword had held off the vermilion bird tribe army in his most feeble state. Su Xiaolan's eyes were filled with infatuation and fascination. Unlin was super mesmerizing in this state. He was clearly in an extremely feeble state, and he could only unleash less than 1/10,000th of his full power. However, he was far more mesmerizing than he had been in the past. This was the image of an extremely feeble man standing in front of her with a resolute determination to hold off the vermilion bird tribe army. This scene would forever be engraved into Su Xiaolan's heart. Unlin was so exceptional. If she didn't work harder, how could she be worthy of Unlin? With this in mind, Su Xiaolan's Dao heart became even more resolute, and her vermilion bird heart essence cultivation seemed to have reached a new level as her entire body began to transform. As for Unlin, he was feeling extremely good, and all of the pores on his body had opened up. Unlin looked around at the vast heaven and earth with an indifferent expression, but he was feeling extremely good in his heart. Even if I'm a cripple who can't use my power, I can still crush all of you. Are you all bad *SS? Are you all scared? The Dark Immortal transformation was Unlin's most powerful trump card, but the crippled state he would be in after using it was the biggest flaw of this technique. Unlin came up with a series of countermeasures in response to this flaw. He swallowed high-rank immortal pills to quickly replenish his energy, and he used the sword burial technique of the 6 strikes of the war god as a self-defense technique. The most unique thing about the sword burial technique was that even if he didn't use his own power, he could still unleash unparalleled power just by sacrificing the essence of the immortal tool and using his sword intent alone. The only downside was that it was extremely expensive. A high-rank immortal tool cost over 10 million spirit stones. However, the one thing that Unlin didn't lack the most was money. It was exactly because of this that the sword burial technique became his most powerful self-defense technique. All he had to do was buy money. Unlin still had several hundred of these immortal swords in his inventory, so what was there to panic about? Setting aside the fact that Unlin was just bluffing, even if all of the vermilion bird tribe powerful beings pounced on him at once, Unlin wouldn't panic in the slightest. Instead, he would be able to show them just how terrifying a kryptonite tycoon was. Chapter 1935. The vermilion bird powerful beings that Unlin was looking forward to didn't come to pass. Even though he was very feeble now, The image of him insta-killing a Tao integration stage 3 super mighty figure was still fresh in the minds of all the vermilion bird powerful beings. The vermilion bird heart essence was indeed very tempting, but they had to be alive to enjoy it. The 6 vermilion bird sages were already beginning to doubt their lives. As one of the 4 top secluded clans of the star field, its strength was extremely powerful and its heritage was extremely deep. But now it was being suppressed by 2 humans to the point where it couldn't even lift its head? Unlin stood in front of Su Xiaolan. No matter how feeble his aura was, no matter how feeble he looked, none of the vermilion bird tribe powerful beings dared to take a single step forward. He was a top-tier power on his own. He stood there alone like an insurmountable mountain. The vermilion bird tribe powerful beings were suddenly struck by a sense of despair and powerlessness. How could there be such a person in this world? Unlin was clearly very feeble, and he was clearly putting on an expression that said, "I'm very weak, come and *CK me up," but the vermilion bird tribe powerful beings were still very fearful and hesitant. The vermilion bird tribe had twice as many super mighty figures as the Azure Dragon tribe, but why did the guardian goddess of the Azure Dragon tribe, Bai Shui, say that the vermilion bird tribe would definitely be able to gather fewer Tao integration stage super mighty figures than the Azure Dragon tribe? This sentence was finally expressed vividly in this scene. The vermilion bird tribe was indeed very proud, but compared to their pride, they cherished their lives more. A series of tiny red divine patterns began to appear on Su Xiaolan's snowy white skin. These red divine patterns even extended to her face, but they were not messy and disorderly. Instead, they were extremely orderly, as if they were conforming to some kind of great Tao. Her eyeshadow became a bright red, and her delicate ears were tinged with a hint of red. Her lips were extremely vibrant and eye-catching, and one couldn't help but want to kiss them. Unlin looked behind him, and he was immediately stunned by her beauty. This Xiaolan was simply too dazzling, more beautiful than all of the divine flowers in the world. Just as Unlin was lost in thought, a pair of white wings suddenly unfurled from Su Xiaolan's back. Unlike the vermilion bird's blood-red wings, Su Xiaolan's wings were more holy and flawless. It was as if all the pureness and beauty in the world had been gathered on her wings. Hua! Her wings suddenly folded and wrapped around her body, forming a white egg shape. This! Unlin was stunned. Is this ancestral awakening? Then, he began to worry. Even if you want to revert, you don't have to turn into an egg. Xiaolan, you're not a bird. I don't want to be scared when the egg hatches and a little bird comes out. The white egg shook, as if protesting against Unlin's words. The vermilion bird's aura was still spreading, and it was becoming more and more intense. It had already radiated to hundreds of planets in the vermilion bird star system, and every vermilion bird living being could clearly sense it. Demon! This is a hatching demon egg. Kill! We have to kill this demon in the cradle. If we don't kill this demon, our vermilion bird tribe will definitely be wiped out. When that time comes, we won't be far from extinction. The 6 vermilion bird sages had tears streaming down their faces as they rallied the powerful beings of the vermilion bird tribe. Unlin was a little speechless as he looked at the idiots in the distance. He still hadn't figured out how to deal with them. He would have to wait for Su Xiaolan to complete her inheritance first. Both sides were still in a deadlock. In reality, the longer this deadlock dragged on, the more advantageous it would be for Unlin. He had almost completely absorbed the effects of the 3 first-grade immortal pills, and the insane regenerative abilities of his body of the war god were beginning to appear. Even without the sword burial technique, he could still battle against Tao integration stage super mighty figures. Not taking into account anything else, just the fact that the 6 vermilion bird sages had all ignited their bloodlines was a piece of cake for him. At this moment, the entire realm of stars was shaken by the fall of the vermilion bird. On the dragon origin star, Bai Shui and Qi Yu looked at each other. No way. Su Xiaolan and Enlin went to the Vermilion Bird realm, and Su Xiaolan even used her guardian deity power for the only time. Could it be that they fought the Vermilion Bird? Chi Yu's flesh crawled with fear. I think so. What's most unbelievable to me is, did they win? Did they defeat the Vermilion Bird who had ruled over the Vermilion Bird tribe for countless years? Bai Shui felt like this was an extremely far-fetched speculation, but it was undeniable that this was the most plausible explanation. Even though I've already thought very highly of them, I still underestimated them. Thankfully, our Azure Dragon tribe has a good temper and treats them well. Chi Yu patted his chest with lingering fear in his heart. The Black Dragon, who was in seclusion to refine the Azure Dragon heart essence, couldn't help but open his eyes. Who would have thought that my previous host would be so powerful? If I didn't see it with my own eyes, I wouldn't be able to believe it. He even killed the Vermilion Bird. I wonder if he'll be able to inherit the Vermilion Bird's holy birth. That little girl seems to possess an extremely pure Vermilion Bird bloodline. Could it be her? A series of thoughts flashed through the Black Dragon's mind, but he was still focused on refining the Azure Dragon heart essence. The most important thing now was to return to the holy birth. However, he had already made up his mind. After he regained his holy birth, he was going to build a good relationship with Enlin and Su Xiaolan. Both of them were extremely fortunate, so it wouldn't be a bad idea to befriend them as soon as possible. All of the gods of creation in the boundless realm of stars opened their eyes before turning toward the southern region of the realm of stars. All of them were paying close attention to this massive fall. This was definitely the most astonishing event that had ever taken place in the realm of stars in the past tens of thousands of years. Some of the mighty beings were even unable to repress the excitement in their hearts as they made their way toward the teleportation spell formation and the Vermilion Bird's territory. It was very likely that the Vermilion Bird heart essence had already been obtained by someone, but they were still unable to repress their curiosity and hurried toward the Vermilion Bird's territory to see just which mighty being had obtained the Vermilion Bird heart essence. Among the gods of creation, Heavenly Monarch Bei Luo was most likely an exception. After witnessing the fall of the Vermilion Bird, he was even more certain of his guess. This was definitely Enlin's doing. Enlin had to have unleashed some kind of terrifying trump card to be able to kill the Vermilion Bird. Thank God he had escaped in time. Otherwise, he would have definitely suffered the same fate as the Vermilion Bird. He couldn't help but feel a little smug about his wise decision. Enlin was so terrifying. The 4-9 Immortal Sect was so terrifying. An extremely mighty transcendental power gradually took shape in his mind. Heavenly Monarch Bei Luo was feeling elated, and he was even more determined to live in seclusion. The most important thing now was to find a good place to conceal his identity and reappear after this storm had passed. In the southern region of the heavens, all of the living beings on the various planets looked up at the blood-stained sky with shock, curiosity, or grief on their faces. All of them knew how serious this matter was, but they were more curious about why the Vermilion Bird had fallen and which mighty being had slain her. On the immortal Vermilion Star, Enlin protected the white egg and waited for Su Xiaolan to reappear. He knew that he was most likely going to face the pressure of not just the powerful beings of the Vermilion Bird realm, but the entire realm of stars. However, he wasn't going to back down. He was going to protect Xiaolan at all times. Until Xiaolan's rebirth.